Where it stops, no one knows. We're going headed into the unknown. Na, 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 na.
Hello, 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 everybody. Happy Tuesday. It's Tuesday. Gosh, like the days are just flying by. It's ridiculous. Hi, everybody. Happy Tuesday. Welcome back to Criminality. Or if this is your first time here, welcome to Criminality. So today we're going to be talking about cold case investigator Paul Holes. And many people are like, okay, we know who he is. We don't know who he is. We have some knowledge, but we're not really sure. And I'll tell you guys what brought me to this particular rabbit hole. Back in about March, May of 2022, there was a lot of hubbaloo. I always screw that up. I don't know why. Hullabaloo. Shit. About Paul Holes visiting Delphi. And so obviously knowing that we had an arrest in October of 2022, a lot of people had tied cold case investigator Paul Holes in with the arrest of Richard Allen. So I had just finished reading Down the Hill by Susan Hendricks. We'll talk about that just a tiny bit too. But and she has an interview with Paul Holes, and so I was like, oh yeah, I kind of remember all this info about him. Let's take a look and go through what he contributed, what part he played, and then talk about it with you guys, because we like to go through all the things when it comes to Delphi. So here we are. I'm going to say hi to you guys, and then we'll get started, and I'll tell you guys a little bit about Paul Holes' history before we get into his connection with the Delphi case. Hi, Marshall. What's up, unindicted? Lurking, doing my old man's maintenance. That could be taken a couple different ways. Hi, Junior. Oh, good. Hubba, yeah. It used to be an old TV show. Hi, Hammy. Travis, did you just celebrate a birthday, Travis, or am I mistaken? If so, happy birthday. Happy belated birthday. Hi, Jamie. Hi, Rochelle. Hi, Hybrid. What's up, Karen? Hi, Jenny. I listened to his podcast a few years ago. So he has a couple of podcasts that he was on, like partnered with. We can talk about that too. So I know very, very little about this case. Don't even know this name, Holes. You may know him from a different case. What's up, Jen? Hi, Anon. Sidoob. Hi, Post Punk Mama. Hi, True Crime Fangirl. Hi, Tony. Princess Buttercup. What's up, Princess Buttercup? Hi, Sally. What's up, Tony? I think I already said hi to Tony. I'm just going over. I'm just saying, Tony, I just want to talk to you, apparently. Hi, Nancy. Hi, Steph. What's up, Chris? Hi, Woman Doing Impossible Things. What's up, Phoenix? Hi, Scott. Susan. I didn't, but need to. There's a 3-hour difference between me and her, and days are better for me than evenings most of the time. Oh, okay. Best intro on the tubes. Thanks, True Crime Fangirl. What's up, Christy? Hi, Kit Kat. What's up, Strictly Chaos? Hi, Starlight Ann. Thierry. Hey, Cool Gamer. DB. Na. Let me see who's up here. Hi, Susie Kyo. What's up, Chelsea? Chelsea, I have a question for you. This will be my total sidetrack for the beginning of the live, as I always do, and then people love and make all kinds of fun comments about it. Chelsea, are you the one who brought up the Jessica Roach case to me? I was trying the other day to find who brought that case up, and I think it might have been you, but I cannot remember who brought it up. If it's not you and it's somebody else in this chat, somebody tell me who said, look at the Jessica Roach case. What's up, the Royal We? Hey, Karen. What's up, Pebbles and Marbles? All right, I'm gonna hop back down here so I can see some answers. He's not in the FBI. He worked for a district attorney. You just bought one of his books. Did you buy Unmasked? I'll show you guys. Oh, thanks, Tony. Hi, Brian. Theory thought on why the cell phone connected at 4:30. Could it have been gotten wet and malfunctioned where it couldn't connect to the tower, but once it dried out, it connected at that time? I was thinking that, Brian, but I'll be very honest with you. I cannot wrap my mind around why did it take until 5:30 for the phone to, if it had been wet at 2:15, 2:30, why did it turn off at 5:30? Why did it take so long for the phone to stop connecting? That's my problem. If it got wet, why would it take so long? I emailed you the other day about donation for transfer. I haven't heard back from you. Rosie, I will check it. I have not checked my emails. You guys, life has been kind of chaotic. So I will catch up and I will get back to you, I promise. What's up, Blake? Okay, it wasn't you. Shoot. Okay. What's up, Arnim? Hey, Bonnie. Hi, Heavy Metal Rehab. Jessica was found just a few miles south of my house. Really, Audrey? Okay. So, hi, Funny. I feel like I need a tease real talk follow-up to the Watts anniversary show you did last week. I'm so confused and have many questions. I've been contemplating doing a Watts live and just going through everything I have, or doing something with the Watts case. I really tried to put that case behind me. I mean, it wreaked havoc on my my mental state for dealing with that case for so long. So, hi, Giant Stonehead. Never caught one of your streams. I'm curious how Paul Holes is connected to the case. Ooh, who's E-Nick? Is he talking to me? I'm going to feel very privileged. Very privileged. Search through your messages for each live to see who. I tried to go back. Okay, so hi, Ems, by the way. Hi, Inspector Gadget. What's up, See-Through? I tried to go back through the lives to see who mentioned it. So if any of you guys remember, or if it was you who mentioned the case of Jessica Roach to me, please holler at me. Her name is Jessica Roach. She went missing in 1993, I believe. And somebody said, look at this case. And so I started digging into the case, and I have a couple things that I want to talk about, and I have a couple questions that I have, but I can't for the life of me remember who brought it to my attention. So I'm looking for that person, Jessica Roach. I know it's a little early for the trolls, but, you know, hey, at least they got a notification. That's a positive, right? YouTube's doing something right. Anyway, okay, so let's get back to Paul Holes. If Libby's phone pinged at 4:33 p.m., how was Tobe calling the firemen to go out to the bridge with lights at 2:30 due to a ping? Okay, so it was 5:33 p.m. I have to get my timeline back out because I wasn't prepared to go over that kind of stuff, but we can. So 4:33 a.m. is when the 15 text messages come through, and the phone basically essentially it comes back to life. The ping that he talks, that Tobe contacts the fire department about at about 1:30, 2 o'clock in the morning, is actually when they got the information, or when Tobe supposedly got the information about the 5:30, whatever, 5:40. Now I can't remember the damn time. 5:40. I'll go back and check it because now it's just going to bug me. So I'm going to sit here and say the wrong times. Okay, 4:06 p.m. is the last text message that comes through. $5:44 p.m. is the last ping of the phone that actually comes back with a location. At about 1:30, 2 o'clock in the morning, Tobe contacts the fire chief and says, hey, we have the last ping, and it's out, it's out at the location. A lot of people thought that means the last ping was at like 2 a.m., but it was actually when he was notified about the 5:44 ping, supposedly. What's up, Hansy Bay? Hey, Owl on the Prowl. I saw TC. And then we have nothing from 5:44 p.m. until 4:33 a.m. when the 15 messages come in. So. I feel like a giant cute baby. What's up, Sarah? Hi, Ariel. If Libby's phone pinged all over town, possibly with MP, why didn't it download all the messages? He felt the need to explain the pings. Well, according to what we know from filings so far, we know that they were pinging her phone every 15 minutes. I don't know why it would have taken so long to get that info, but also that Blocher or Blocker, people call him two different things. I don't actually know how to pronounce his last name. He's passed away at this point in time. Nothing to do with the case. Totally, cancer. And but he said, I think his last contact was at 1 a.m. So it kind of makes sense in that timing, but I don't know enough about all that to be able to tell you. But I am studying some stuff. I'm studying some stuff on some firearms. I'm studying stuff on geofencing. I'm doing it. I sent you an email, but I was a dumb teenager with an iPhone 6 in 2017, and water damaged my phone where I just turned it off and on by itself. Ooh, really? All right. Like I said, I have not been in my email. I need to check it. We know that the phone stops recording steps. The Apple Health stops recording steps at 2:32. That's good that some people are studying up on geofencing. Well, you're going to understand once we get into the rabbit hole of Paul Holes. So let's get to that, and then because it's going to lead us into why I'm studying stuff about geofencing. Not that I shouldn't be anyway, because I should, but it's just in firearms for me, I just have no interest, and so it's really, I've studied firearms many, many times in my life, and I do not retain that info because I just don't like them. So I just don't. I mean, it's not that I care about the gun itself. I just don't like it. All the stuff that goes to do with like ballistics and that kind of stuff just does not retain my attention. Like I just can't. I'm just like, eh. But okay. So first things first. Let's go over here. So Paul Holes was actually in forensics in Costa County, California. And I believe his wife actually still is, or she might be retired now too. But he played an integral part in finding the Golden State Killer, who also had multiple names because they didn't know, and I'm not going to go too far into the Golden State Killer because that's a whole nother huge rabbit hole. And if you're interested in stuff like that, I mean, it's a great case, but the Golden State Killer had committed homicides in Southern California, Central California, Northern California. And because they knew that they had a serial killer on their hands, he essentially had like multiple serial killer, names throughout California. Paul Holes was one of the biggest contributors to law enforcement tying all these California serial killers into being one and actually becoming the Golden State Killer. He was also a big part in getting law enforcement to use genetic genealogy. I would say, I don't know if I would call them a team, but there's a group of people who are very passionate about obviously solving this crime, but also genetic genealogy was becoming kind of popular at that point due to another arrest that actually is like really like not many people actually know about, but it was a couple that had come down into Oregon and so on. It's a long story, but like I said, I don't want to get too far off into these other case rabbit holes, but essentially people were like, wait a minute, we could do this, like we could use this and try it. So Michelle McNamara was actually really good friends with him, and I have her book. It's a great book. If you guys have not read Michelle McNamara's book, it's it's wonderful. Michelle McNamara is somebody else who's passed away. So he was friends with her. So as he was doing forensics, he was really fascinated with a lot of things that had to do with cold cases. So he ended up becoming an investigator for the district attorney's office doing cold case investigations, which is how he got into dealing with things when it came to the Golden State Killer. So he's now just essentially, now he's retired, but I mean, he still does, I think he still does, you know, he still likes to be involved in stuff. But he became, for many years, was a cold case investigator. So sometimes law enforcement will ask him for help or ask him just for his, you know, just to take a look at something and, you know, not necessarily have to be involved and actually investigate it, but just to kind of like take a peek, tell us what you think from your experience of doing this for so long. And so he ended up actually writing a book. And I could show you all kinds of videos on him. He does tons of interviews, especially after he launches the book. But what he does say is essentially he wrote his own book. He wrote it and then he wanted to have it published. And it was like how, you know, how they caught the Golden State Killer. And he wanted to have it published. And then people were, you know, the people who read the books before they're published were like, oh, no, like this is terrible. You need a ghostwriter. So he ended up bringing on a ghostwriter and they worked together. And it essentially became more of a story about his life. And Michelle McNamara's book smells good. It does. It smells good. It's right here. I'll be gone in the dark. So he ended up writing this book, but it ended up becoming more about his life and like how he went from, you know, doing things in forensics to how he became like a cold case investigator. And then it does talk about the Golden State Killer. So if you guys are, if anybody's like, who is Paul Holes? He's really known for the Golden State Killer case. Like that's where his you know, fame essentially comes from. I guess you'd say his notoriety comes from. Hey, Criminal Network. He has an amazing life story. He really does. So they did a great job on putting together, you know, he just wrote like these chapters and he was not a writer, obviously. So he just puts it all together and he's like, here. So this is the story of Paul Holes. And you guys want to see, this is Michelle McNamara's book. I'll Be Gone in the Dark. This is an amazing read. It's very, very good. So just FYI, I'll just put it under this book. But like I said, that's not the case that we're talking about. So I just wanted to give you a little background on who he is and then how he ends up tying into the Delphi case and why many people suspected that he actually had something to do with solving the Delphi case. You bought this book for $1.25. Which one? Did you buy hers or did you buy his? My head will explode if that's what happened, for fuck's sake. All right, I don't want to give away the spoilers, but if he got access to the case info and saw RA was an early witness that CC failed to look into, ineptitude, so Carroll County, hook, line, and sinker, thought RA just had to be one because PH said to look into him. Well, that would be interesting. They also hope the defense doesn't understand that so they can get them with a gotcha. Hey, Bonkers, babe. Did I say hi, Criminal Network? If I didn't, hello. Hi, CSM. Genealogy is interesting. I love genealogy. It's one of my favorite hobbies. Hey, Sherry D. Haven't followed this case, but just miss watching you. Aw. It's good to see you. Hey, Anja, I'm not sure if RA had anything to do with this. I was wondering if one of the girl's boyfriend's father had participated in this awful crime. I think a lot of people are thinking about that. It's so boring. I know. That's where I'm at. I'm like, like I had to take a class on it, like when I was doing like for my forensic stuff, but I'm like, it just did not, I do not retain it. I just don't, I find no interest in it. But geofencing is actually pretty cool. So I'm like, you know what, this actually, I could probably retain some of that information, which I need to anyway, because I typically only know about it from watching trials. And then of course you move on to the next trial and it's like, okay, what did you get out of it? Hey, Jessica. AJ, wet phones take a long time to dry out in the best circumstances. In a dry, warmer environment, I doubt any phone is going to dry out in its own overnight, on its own in an overnight, on its own overnight in a shoe under a child. For me, if it had to do with the phone being wet, I just don't know why it took so long for the phone to shut off. So 2:13 is the video of Bridge Guy, and then by 5:44 the phone isn't working. So what takes so long for the phone to get wet that it shuts off? I mean, like, what takes so long for it to shut off if it's wet? Why didn't it just shut off? I mean, I know my nephew jumped into the pool the other day with his phone in his pocket, and that thing was done for. Well, I mean, he swam for a while before he realized he had his phone in his pocket. So maybe that's it, because it wasn't, because I know that like newer phones now, you can actually like take them underwater for little bits of time, and he was in there for hours. So I don't know. I mean, I've dropped phones in water back in the day. Okay. Okay, so anyway, so this is the book Paul Holes wrote, and co-wrote, I should say, because like I said, he ended up having a ghostwriter that came in to help him out with it. So now let's go to why people were up in arms about Paul Holes. So he posted a photo at the beginning of 2022 out on the Monon High Bridge. So this is kind of one of the first indicators of like, hey, what the heck? What is Paul Holes doing out on the Monon High Bridge? I do know the date, but I can't, for whatever reason, I can't remember if it was March or May. It's an M month at the beginning of 2022. It's March or May. So it's right in this, I'm just going to go with springtime of 2022. I would be stunned they let PH look at anything. They never want someone else getting credit or seeing the major problems. They are way too secretive. Right. Okay, so then, so this starts causing like a whole big, ruckus of what's going on. And he ends up, let me find the one I want. He ends up going to CrimeCon with, as you can see here, you have Mike Patty, Becky Patty, Kelsey, and Tara. This is in springtime again of 2022. A ghostwriter is an alias. Well, I don't. Maybe I'm calling it the wrong thing, CSM. But I thought it was a ghostwriter, like the person who comes in and like helps you write. Is he wearing leather pants? I don't know. He's wearing slacks. Does he look like he's wearing leather pants? What's up, Carrie? Okay, so I'm going to play this for just a hot second. I just want you guys to tell me that you can hear it.
To get the family.
Just let me know you can hear it. And then, has Carrie been to any CrimeCon? A pseudonym is the alias. Thank you. You can hear it. Okay, perfect. So this was on YouTube, and the volume was so bad, I just downloaded it and then upped the volume. So I can kind of adjust it a little bit, but so this is my warning to you guys. If there are parts that are really loud, there's other parts that are soft. I can't change that now because of the way that I had to try to get where we could hear what he was saying, because it was ridiculous on YouTube. No, I don't think so. No Holman. There's no Holman in this one. Yeah, Carrie never went to CrimeCon or did any major interviews. I know she did a couple on YouTube. Okay, so this is Paul Holes, and then here's Susan Hendricks, and that's why I said we're going to talk about the interview from the book also. All right, I'm going to play this. Let me just back it up just a tiny bit.
And Paul is here to discuss just the
Time to really talk about this and go through it. And if you have something that
the girls, Abby and Libby, had the day off from school. It was a makeup snow day. It was unseasonably warm. And they asked Kelsey, Libby did, if they could have a ride to the trails. And Kelsey said yes, dropped them off, and that was the last time she saw them. The next day, their bodies were found, and this family has never been the same. And Paul Holes, as most of you know, retired investigator, he has seen a lot and knows just what this can do to an entire family. And Paul is here to discuss just the heartache that everyone goes through, considering if they live through something happening to a loved one.
Well, no, that's absolutely correct. And this is where, law enforcement has an obligation to do everything they possibly can to get the family an answer. It doesn't bring the loved ones back, right? But it most certainly is something that we need to get an answer. And then there's the public safety component. The type of crime that this individual did is something that may be repeated. And this individual is a dangerous man, and he needs to be taken off the streets, and he needs to be prosecuted to the full extent of the law.
And you understand it more than most. A mind that would do something like this is capable of it. You say they're able to stop this type of behavior for a chunk of time.
Absolutely. And that's what, I've personally seen with various individuals that I've looked at for my cases is, there are individuals that are more regular in terms of the crimes that they commit. They're periodic. Then there are individuals that will do crimes in clusters. And, this goes to personality types. This goes to what's going on in their lives. Is there a certain type of stress that they're experiencing, a loss of a job, a divorce, and then they strike out at innocent individuals as a result of that.
You talk openly in your book about being so dedicated to this, to the victims and to their families, but at a cost with your own personal life. And by no means are you saying this is easy.
No, well, it's not easy. These are horrific crimes. And, everybody working this case, what they have been subjected to as the professional side is of course going to be taking its toll as they continue to try to solve this case. But it doesn't compare to what the family has gone through. Mm-hmm. And that's really what the important part of this is. And it's really to try to keep, law enforcement on the right track to make sure that they get the answer. And again, it's not going to bring the loved ones back.
And you say that an investigator is wrong until they're right. What do you mean by that?
Well, when you have an unsolved case.
I don't know if he'll talk about it in this, and like I said, I don't want to go too far into Golden State Killer stuff, but he actually had pinned, mentally, I should say, in his own mind, had believed that there was an individual that was responsible for and was the Golden State Killer, and he went very hard trying to prove that this person was in fact the killer, and ultimately it was not. So he had picked a suspect, and then so part of what he talks about in his book too, and in some interviews, I don't know if he brings it up here at CrimeCon or not, but he talks about what it's like to be an investigator, that you think you've got the right guy. So in doing that, how you only look at the evidence that supports you having the right person, instead of actually looking at all the evidence that's presented and finding the person that matches it. And he talks about how that actually goes on. Like, most investigators have a case that's like that. And so he did. For a long time, he thought that there was a person responsible, and that person was not responsible at all.
There's all sorts of investigative leads that come in, either from witnesses, various tips, even physical evidence. And as you march down those investigative leads, you develop individuals that you think are potentially responsible. And sometimes you end up thinking, well, I've got the right guy here, only to have something like a DNA elimination occur. But part of the complexity is that we are so reliant on circumstantial evidence. Mm-hmm. And you have to be. I mean, that's just part of us as humans, is trying to evaluate the world and the case. And sometimes you can be blind to the evidence and the circumstantial evidence. evidence. You think, oh, I've got this bit of information and it adds up. This is the guy. But then there's other aspects that don't seem to add up as much, but have a tendency to ignore that. And I've done that.
Because the desire is to want to catch the bad guy, and you eliminate what doesn't fit with your theory, and you bring in what does.
It's bias.
And you say for 2 years.
Just remember, this is happening in spring of 2022. Richard Allen has not been arrested yet.
Years you had the wrong guy with the Golden State Killer. You thought, this is him, I know I have him.
Yes.
And then you didn't.
That's just it. And that's where in that particular case, I kind of chose the details within the case file that matched this guy, and there was details that didn't. And I said, well, I can excuse that. I can make it, come up with a reason why that doesn't work. And then ultimately, the DNA evidence showed I was wrong. And that's when, I stepped back and I reassessed. And there's a great article out there by Dr. Rossmo called Criminal Investigative Failures. And this is a trap that all investigators can fall into. And it's really, you make the failure by picking a suspect and trying to make the evidence fit. And what you need to do is have the evidence and see if the suspect fits the evidence. So that's something that I learned the hard way.
And Becky, it reminded me a little bit of how you post every day, even a couple hours ago, that today is the day. Meaning an investigator's wrong until he's right. Today is the day. Eventually it will be the day. Has that been inspiring to other people? It's inspiring to me.
Well, every day, it's the hope every day. You get up and you think, that's how we have to look at it every day. Today could be the day. So I post that.
I just want to pause it real quick. Thank you, Carrie, for the membership, and thank you for being a member for 5 months. And welcome to whoever was lucky enough to get that membership. I want to talk about, I'm going to touch on Susan really quick. So she's supposed to be a journalist, which means she's supposed to be looking at it as an unbiased person. I find Susan to actually be very, very kind. I think she's a very kind person. She's just, her journalistic approach is wrong when it comes to this case. And she becomes more of a spokesperson versus a journalist. Because as we know, journalists should be unbiased and not have any, they should just be reporting the facts and the truth of the matter. Well, I'm not upset with her for being biased, really. I'm not, because of the fact that she got very close to at least the Patties, which I think my biggest struggle with this is when people refer to the families, they typically are referring to the Patties. And Anna and Carrie are not always included in that. They just say the families, but Carrie and Anna have their own interpretations of all of this information that's happened over 7 years that varies a lot from what the Patties believe. So there's a lumping them all together and saying close with the families is not necessarily accurate. She's close with the Patties. So in her quote unquote journalistic endeavors, she really pushes isn't the right word. She really stands for the Patties. So she becomes a spokesperson. Her book is a testament to it. If you guys have read her book, it's written really well. It's not a bad book. It's just very much about being a spokesperson for the Patties. Now, that's a choice that she gets to make. She's a grown-ass woman. I think that she's, like I said, I think that she's obviously very kind. I am not a journalist. I've never gone to school for journalism. Obviously, I have a YouTube channel, so it throws me into some weird journalistic category. But I'm not a journalist. I've never been an investigative journalist. I've never done anything like that. But I can tell you, and we were talking about the Watts case at the beginning of this live, I can tell you from my personal experience, getting close to people involved in the families creates a bias that you can't get rid of. And even if she thinks something that she wants to tell the public, she now no longer can, because it wrecks her relationship with the people who are probably her friends. I would say they're probably friends, or her, it affects her information. It just does. who is Susan? Susan Hendricks she's the author of the book that we are talking about today, Down the Hill, and she is also the one who's conducting this panel at CrimeCon. So I think that the biggest problem. It's not, like I said, it's not even a real problem. You have to put her in the category she belongs. She's obviously not a journalist when it comes to this case. She gave up that title, I guess you will. She gave up that title in order to be friends with the Patties and became a spokesperson for the Patties. That's her choice. She has the right to do that, but it's a problem when it comes to coming out and saying this is like my journalism and this is my journalistic integrity and this is that, because you lose that. But she's welcome to do it whichever way she wants. But for me personally, you just lose your journalistic integrity and you cannot report on the story factually once you have already gone that close. And like I said, I know that from my own life, and also just watching what happens to people who get in contact with the families of any of these victims on any case that we cover. Once you're too close, you no longer can, and not even just the families, law enforcement, investigate, anybody. Once you're too close, you lose your own right to your own opinion, because now you're forcing their opinion out to the public. And that's a problem for me. So, okay, so let's go back to this. So if anybody, Susan Hendricks, once again, she's the author of Down the Hill. She does have her own YouTube channel. I don't think she does much on it now. But
That out there as a reminder that it's coming, and maybe today's the day.
And in the most quiet times, Kelsey, when you're alone and you're thinking about this, do you imagine the day that the news does come down that it is that person? And what does that bring on? What type of feeling? I know that closure doesn't exist, but what does that feel like?
It just reminds me that there's another chapter to the book. I don't think it'll bring closure, and I don't even think that it'll bring happiness. I think it'll be another form of sadness. I know just like my friends that have celebrated it, and they do celebrate for a little bit, but also when they go home, they have that sense of, wow, this is real. Like it becomes more real for them.
I didn't know that one.
I think that's kind of where we'll be at. It'll be a new stage of grief, I think.
And with the Golden State Killer, I believe it was April 20th, 2018, you were at P.F. Chang's of all places. You get the call that this had happened. You really do get the guy. And I thought it was so poignant when you get the call from the youngest victim, and she was crying, saying, is this it? Did you get the guy? Did you get the guy? But the tears were of, I would imagine, exacerbation of saying, finally.
Yes.
So FYI, and once again, not spending too much time on Golden State Killer stuff, but just an interesting little bit of information. He actually retired, and he was out to dinner with his wife, like celebrating retirement. And that's when he got the call they'd arrested the Golden State Killer and that they had their guy. So he was like one day into retirement. So he actually wasn't even part of the team that got to actually go and get him.
And that's the experience is that the trauma is always there, and even when that answer comes, and like Kelsey's saying, some of the Golden State victims killers, that was a traumatic event, because now they knew who had attacked them, or they knew who had taken one of their loved ones away. And now they had a face and a name. And that is going to be something that is going to be hard to kind of assimilate, because now you know who Abby and Libby saw.
Do you feel like there is justice, maybe? Is that where the feeling goes?
Well, from the way that I have experienced this is that, the answer leads to justice. And the person being convicted, or in D'Angelo's case, pleading or admitting to all his crimes, now you have the sentence, the penalty. But then it's like, well, is that penalty enough for the crime? Mm-hmm. And different people have different thoughts on what the offender should get. But it is going to be something to where that is what in our legal system is considered justice. The person has been found or has pled guilty, and now they have been assigned a penalty. But it does not eliminate the tragedy of the crime.
And Tara, do you still find yourself, as I would, driving around Delphi, wondering if they are driving next to you, if they're still there? It's a small town, for those who don't know, a little over 2,000. How is that to think they're still out there?
It's not just Delphi, it's actually everywhere we go. Our job, we travel a lot. So we do find ourselves watching, looking, still to this day, everybody that may fit the description.
And Becky, when those days go away, when, I say when, not if, he's caught, will that feel like a relief, not having to look over your shoulder and wondering if they fit the description?
The relief will be knowing that he's no longer out there and could ever do this to anybody else. At that point in time, we know another family's not going to go through what we are. I can't say what other emotions will probably happen. We'll find that out one day. But the big thing is that he can't hurt somebody else.
And Mike, have you thought about if the answer comes and it's clear that the person is no longer with us, meaning deceased, what will that feel like?
I'm sorry.
If the case is where the person is deceased,
okay.
where you don't have the chance, I would imagine you want to say something, to feel something.
Yeah, I've thought a lot about the what I would say if he ends up being deceased. That would be a frustration, you know what I mean? Not being able to have my day in court, per se, because he's taken so much. This person's taken so much from us, you know, from our families. It's hard to express just sitting here looking at the picture in front of us. You know, that's heart-wrenching in itself, because I can remember that, you know.
Just the laughter in your kitchen, I've been there. And there is so much of Libby around, her pictures and her smile. And Becky, you've shared before that there were sticky notes that she had left, that after this you find yourself finding them, right?
Yes. Oh, yes. She was known for sticky notes. Some of her teachers she left the sticky notes for. And so in my car, up in the sun visor, she left me a sticky note. She just loved to make people feel good.
And Kelsey, Abby and Libby were great friends, playing sports together. Is it difficult seeing these pictures, as your grandfather said, on it being frozen in time for them?
I wouldn't say it's difficult. When I see them, it just reminds me of the life that she lived and that Abby lived, and just how happy they were and how happy they wanted other people to be too.
And is it your thought process that this person will not steal that, who they were and the joy that they had?
Yeah, absolutely. I don't want him to win. I want to take my power back. And as long as I'm still hurting when I look at those pictures, and as long as I'm still angry, then he's winning. He's taking my life. And he already took two, so he doesn't get mine too.
It's been 5 years, Paul, which is excruciatingly long. You've been part of cases that are much longer in time. The evidence that the authorities do have, can that be sustained? What has to take place in terms of the evidence?
Well, the evidence itself, you know, the authorities haven't released what they really have, you know, and in this type of crime, with what I know, that there is a good chance that there's evidence that could solve the case. And that's where today, I think there needs to really be a reassessment of the evidence, because in my experience, having come out of the forensic world, you know, I know how that work is done. And
ironically, Criminal Network, this is actually, this is not too far before the arrest. It's in spring and then he's arrested in fall. So yeah. Somebody asked, I wonder what Anna thinks. Hammy asked. Last I saw of Anna was actually on a Facebook post where she was kind of arguing back and forth with somebody, and I'll leave that person's name out of it for now, who kept saying that the person who was posting kept saying that the families think this way, and that anybody who defends Richard Allen or Richard Allen's constitutional rights is going against the families. And Anna actually essentially commented and said, like, no, like, that's wrong. Like, I'm waiting for the trial. I'm waiting for the evidence, and I'm waiting to see that this is the right person. Like, you're like telling the poster, like, you're wrong, and I'm waiting. Hey, Mar. Yes, the Lacey Scott Peterson doc, 3 parts on Netflix, dropped recently. I was reminded that Lacey's mom, brother, other family members didn't seem to say anything about their thoughts on guilty, not guilty.
Evidence may be submitted, like look for DNA, and then it comes back as negative for DNA, and that's what you think. There's absolutely no way there's DNA on this item of evidence, but you don't know just from a report, well, how much of that evidence was actually tested, because oftentimes it's just a small sampling. There's a visible stain. They focus in on that visible stain, but the rest of the, let's say, a shirt hasn't been even looked at. And, there's a lot of DNA evidence that is not visible. And so for me, when I get involved in a case, one of the first things that I will do in a case like this is, in addition to wanting to see the core of the case, the crime scene, is also what forensic testing has been done. But I don't want it just the reports. I want the DNA analysts, or all the analysts' notes, their photographs. I want to see the evidence so I can see exactly where samples have been taken. And then I will start to dig into what I think is the next round of evidence testing, because there's always further testing that can be done. And so that's where, like in this case, I would be digging in and seeing what can be done past what has already been done.
And Paul has a unique perspective, being, of course, part of the science aspect of it, but also being the investigator, even at times during his close to 30-year career, asking to do both, so much so they called you Hurricane Holes.
Yes.
Saying, oh no, he wants us to do double the work. But even looking outside of what investigators would look for, and testing, I believe in one of the cases, the bottom of someone's foot, what no one else was thinking of. And it turned out to have DNA, right? If you could elaborate on that.
That's right. This was a case in which a woman had been bludgeoned to death in a mobile trailer as her and her husband were building a mansion nearby. A very wealthy couple, and the husband was gone, and then her body.
So I'll just say on the whole the Carrie and Anna situation. When I was covering Delphi back in 2019. Those are the 2 people in the case I had spoken with at the time. And they were both very kind to me. So I have nothing to say in any negative way whatsoever about Anna or Carrie at all. They're both very kind to me, very open to talking. Obviously, there was no arrest at the time. There was no anything like that. I've never, once I started my own channel, I never reached back out to them. Like I said, there's something that happens to a person when you get very close to family members, and it's very hard to report on things based on what I see versus how I feel about them. So, it is what it is, but I have no ill will towards either. The moms are, to me, the heart of the whole thing. They're the ones that they lost their baby, and Anna especially. And I've said this when I cover kids cases, there's I've obviously never lost one of my children that was alive. I've had miscarriages in my life, but that's a whole nother story. But I'm just saying I've never had, and I've never lost anybody to anything as extreme as what happened to these girls, ever, obviously. But I've always, in covering kids cases, I've always looked at parents who have other children and think, like they have something that they have to live for, right? Like they have to continue on. They don't have a choice because their other children still need a mom, still need a dad, still need a grandma or a grandpa. You know, they still need that. But when you have somebody like Anna who lost her everything, there's like a part of me that I'm just like, I don't even know how to wrap my mind around it, because like, how do you continue to do anything? So even though I've known that, like in Criminal Network said, like she went off on him a couple times, you know, or whatnot. I've seen her go off on people in Facebook groups. I don't know. For me personally, and once again, why I don't get overly involved in the families anymore is because I could not imagine having my whole life just gone. Like I couldn't imagine losing one of my children, but if it was my only, like it's like it's out of this world. I could never wrap my mind around that. Like I said, it's not that the other ones who lost a child is any better, but I know that they have something they have to keep going. You know, they have to. So I don't know. For me, I guess I personally give her more grace than I give anybody else in the entire situation. And that's my thing. Other people don't have to do that. You know, like I said, Carrie and Anna, those, if I have a soft spot, it's for those two. That's where my soft spot is.
Was found inside this trailer, and there had been an extensive struggle, a lot of blood.
I didn't mark it to know exactly where he talks about Delphi.
Smeared around the trailer in the family room area, as well as a lot of the items, the furniture having been overturned. And this told me, you know, this offender really struggled to get this woman under control. And, you know, one of the things that I looked at was, this is not a real big, strong man. And then the other thing I noticed is that her foot had been pushed through the bottom of her sock. Why he struggled to get. It's not unusual for what we have to deal with. That is typical. Paramedics arrive. Understand that some of these offenders do behaviors at a crime scene that most normal people would never think about. And having that knowledge, and this is where profilers come in, where they can say, this is what I am possibly seeing here. I can then focus my energies to find evidence in places where people think, oh, there's no chance that there's evidence there. And so that's where I would hope to be able to take a look in this case to be able to see if I could see something and maybe give some advice.
And I think that does bring hope to families, because you have a way of seeing things that other people don't based on
That's
your
what
experience.
We're going to talk about what
and Becky, you said early on.
We're going to go into, I'm just trying to give you guys some background right here, but we're going to go into what he thinks is the key piece of evidence in solving the Delphi case. So we're just doing backstory right now. We're going to get there. I know other people are like, tell me the connection. But just doing some backstory.
That you hang your hat on, or you hung your hat on investigators telling you, look, it's not something that they were doing online. And then all of a sudden the Anthony Schatz profile comes up. And you almost thought, should I blame myself? I even warned them about online activity. But obviously, you shouldn't blame yourself. But that could happen, that young girls are online and you don't know exactly what's happening, even with the warnings.
Yes. When the Anthony Schatz thing came out, that was a hard blow, because I had never gone down that path, and we had been led to believe that it wasn't it wasn't social media. So when it came out that it was, then I realized that she had been talking to somebody on social media, and I didn't catch it. So at that, I feel like I failed her. I failed both girls because I wasn't tech savvy enough. I really thought she would never do that, because she loved crime shows. And after these crime shows and stuff, we used to talk. We talked about that stuff. So I really never thought that she would do anything. And I trusted her. And I never checked her phones. But I didn't know even what to check. So there's a lot of blame there. And
I could tell Paul wants to jump in here.
Yeah, no, because this is not your fault. I think this is something when you think about normal teenage behavior, right now, this is a time when they are going to be gaining independence. Everybody.
My opinion, and this is literally just my opinion, is we know that there is DNA and we know that there is fingerprints. We know they have both. We just don't know if they have it of a potential killer or if they ended up figuring out who it belonged to and ruled that person out. So I wonder, because of Paul Holes and his forensic background and then working on cold cases, if he, and then his role in getting the DNA to Parabon in order to, help solve he didn't obviously do the DNA himself, but in pushing the right people and the right buttons to get the DNA from the Golden State Killer over to Parabon, which is genetic genealogy lab. I'm wondering if he thought that he was going to be able to do something, like go there and help with that, or if he just wanted to be a part of it. I'm not really sure what his intention was by doing it, but that's the only thing that kind of makes sense to me, is the forensic side of, hey, you guys have all of this stuff with an actual video, you have DNA, you have fingerprints, yet you haven't caught this guy, and it's 2022. What's going on?
Everybody has secrets, and it doesn't mean that they're bad secrets. But you also have to understand that the online world, there are individuals out there that are very good at, zeroing in, kind of casting a wide net, and then finding sort of somebody that they can start to lure in. And it's not necessarily anything bad. It's, we see, images of that guy
Anthony
that
Schatz,
Anthony
yeah.
Schatz was using. That guy is not Anthony Schatz. But obviously he's an attractive looking guy. He's a younger guy. And this is something to where, maybe the communications were really just trying to ensnare and build trust. Hey, I'm this cute guy. I'm fun. And then, this is that grooming process where now it's, okay, how can I, get.
I thought so too, DB, but he never really did anything with it. He never did anything with it. He never did a big podcast on it, because that was another huge thing back in 2022 when people were like, oh, he's there to help the investigation. And other people were like, no, he's just there because he's got this podcast now. But he never really did anything with Delphi. It never became a huge part of his podcast or anything. So it was kind of, I don't know. It just didn't make sense to me. Now, why wasn't IgG used in this case, even after listening to Paul? I still can't figure out why. Well, I know that when Becky Patty had commented at one point that she had talked to CC Moore, who you guys don't know a lot about investigative genetic genealogy. She's what do they call it? Like a founder of it, essentially, and using it as an investigative tool in murder cases and things like that. So Becky Patty had spoken with her, and she had essentially said in a Facebook post that she had told CC that the law enforcement already had their own people dealing with the DNA, that they didn't need help. And I'm not quoting it 100% verbatim, but essentially that's what was said. And then we've heard so many rumors throughout all the years that the DNA is degraded, that the DNA didn't have enough markers, that, we've heard all kinds of things about this DNA, that they weren't able to, do anything with it. But then we've also heard the flip side of that is that they've collected DNA from many, many, many suspects or persons of interest. And if it's that degraded, they have nothing, and that the markers are so low, it would not make sense. It would not make sense to me, just knowing what I know about DNA, it would not make sense to me that they wouldn't be able to do something with it. I mean, Othram and Parabon, those companies are, they're high tech, they're high level. So why are we running this DNA against all these suspects just looking for a partial, let's say it's 9 markers. And like I said, I'm trying not to go too sidetracked from what Paul's talking about, but let's just say we're going to it's 9 markers. And they need 14 to take it to trial anyway. So I don't understand what we're talking. Like, it's like apples and oranges to me. We heard about animal hair essentially in Ron Logan's search warrant. Yeah, they've been saying no usable DNA for quite some time, now years. But then if it's not usable, why are they still taking all of these DNA samples from people as of, according to Patrick Westfall, in September of last year, they took his. So how does that, if we don't have DNA to compare it to, what the hell are we doing?
Gain trust where I can start asking questions.
The other thing I'll say is that, before I keep going with this, is Kim Riley, who's retired and no longer on this case, he specifically stated to Michael Kett, and I have a short video on it if you guys want to go look at it, where I put together all the stuff about, all the interviews where the investigators are talking about DNA and fingerprints, and he specifically says what we do know is that this person has not been caught for committing a crime, which means they took either the fingerprints or the DNA and ran it through the system to see if that person had anything outstanding. So whatever they had to be usable in the to the extent that they were able to figure out that this person had never been caught for committing a crime. Just saying, like, so. Yeah. So it was either, if it was fingerprints, it would have been an APHIS, but yeah, there's nothing.
About, hey, when are your parents home? Are you free to be able to meet me someplace? And this is something that is, most parents are not going to catch because these guys are so adept at doing this. So you can't blame yourself and you can't blame Libby or Abby in terms of what they are doing and who they're interacting with when it comes to this.
This is going to be a very intriguing part, Women Doing Impossible Things. When we keep going, the geofencing is going to come back.
And Kelsey, I know you're getting married in June, pretty soon, and we were talking earlier, and she said, I feel less stressed. I'm not really fixating on the colors of things, and planning this has been difficult. And I follow you on Instagram and on Twitter, and you talk so much about who Abby and Libby were. And I think that's so important because we're always talking about the guy in the bridge and the video and the voice and the grainy picture that Kelsey always talks about her sister. And if you could read this, because I think it's so important, talking about your sister. And that's a post you posted on Twitter.
My favorite thing is to be asked, who was your sister? It's the hardest question because I have a million answers. She was and is the best. The greatest friend, granddaughter, sister, daughter, cousin, and niece.
This family, Paul, is so, I guess the word is resilient. They look at it as just going forward and being here at CrimeCon we're trying to figure out 4 or 5 years now. But there is hope for them. And after reading your book and thinking about 20 years, 30 years, time can go by and there is always hope that it will be solved.
There's always hope, and in this particular case, with the circumstances as I know it, I think that there is a chance that there could be evidence that could solve the case. And technology is improving. And so there's a possibility that even if they've attempted what they possibly could attempt at this point in time, there is the chance that there could be technology that comes down the road in order to help solve the case. But I kind of go back to the released images of that offender. We have an image of this man, and there is some confusion out there in terms of, well, which composite we should be looking at, and that I think needs to be clarified by the investigating agency. And I have some questions about these composites. However, this is where the public is so critical in this case. If they don't have identifying evidence of the offender, Now it's a matter of relying on witnesses. And by witnesses, it's not just people there that day. Now it's also people who possibly know who these men are. And, you know, for me, when I take a look at these composites, you know, the first one that they released here, you know, they released that early on. And so they must have had some information and some confidence that this is what the individual looked like. And then, of course, later, they have a modified composite, but it's during a press conference in which, you know, it almost sounded like they had consulted with a profiler. And it was so specific about, you know, we know you know, that they're almost talking to the offender, that to me, that sounded like what we call a ruse. They're trying to stimulate somebody that they were focused in on, and they had the composite modified in order to freak this guy out, to spook him. And they had eyes on him to see how he responded after they did that. And obviously, it didn't result in any type of incriminating movements or patterns or statements if they're listening in. You know, so now there's some confusion as to, well, what is going on here with these two different composites? And, you know, the first composite, you know, we have that video that they released, that short clip. The details in that video do not show this man's face. So where is this composite coming from? Must be coming from a witness. Well, what is the veracity of that witness? Is that somebody who interacted with a man dressed like that day, right there by the railroad trestle? Is it coming after that video image came out? Is there multiple witnesses that are saying, yeah, that's the guy I saw there? That's something that I would want to know, so I have confidence and say that first composite is what I want people to focus in on. Or what is the veracity of the second composite? If it's not my theory that they were focused in on somebody and trying to, what we call, tickle them, you know, to make them do something, let's clarify that, and then make sure that you all have the right information to focus your energies on this case, because it can be solved that way. The public is a huge resource in this type of case because we have that image. We have a composite. We have people who may know somebody there, you know, and we have to consider post-offense behavior in this case. This man did not expect to be videoed and then have it broadcast across the world. Imagine after he committed this crime, went home and on TV, he's seeing an image of himself walking towards the victims. That is an oh shit moment for him. I guarantee those clothes, those shoes, that hat are gone. And now,
oh, look at that. I guarantee those clothes, that hat, those shoes, they're gone.
now he's cleaning himself up, or he's growing facial hair, he's shaving his head or growing it long, he's losing weight or even gaining weight. He's moving out of town. You know, so if there's
Moving out of town. Interesting.
somebody within that area that says, oh, there's a guy that kind of looked like that, and I just kind of remember him disappearing. All of a sudden, he lost a ton of weight, and he was clean shaven. You know, that's part of, you know, getting the public the right information with the right insight into how this.
So you get rid of your clothes, you get rid of your shoes, but you don't get rid of your gun. So that's kind of an interesting side piece. Let me see. So when it comes to the DNA, I do not believe that the DNA is destroyed. I do not believe that the DNA is too minimal to be used. I believe that the DNA is enough. Otherwise, they would not have been collecting all the DNA from men from the very beginning of this and I can't tell you. So Travis asked, like, was it just men or was it women too? I've never heard of any of the women having their DNA taken. So that's an interesting point. Obviously, we assume, logically, I believe, that the person on the bridge is bridge guy, so that it is a man. But I've never heard of any of the females having their DNA taken. But we do know from back at the beginning, with they did the search warrant right on the Maxwells. They did multiple search warrants on Weber's property. They ultimately ended up doing search warrants on Ron Logan's property. They got Paul Etter, who was one that was believed to be involved. You know, he ended up committing suicide, and then they requested to have his DNA pulled. We know from Patrick Westfall, they just took his DNA. So, I mean, they're taking DNA. If they did not have usable DNA, they would not be going this far into trying to figure out whose DNA it is. Ivy thinks that the DNA is a mixed or not a complete sample and can be used to rule it out. Even if it's mixed, they can still separate it. Unless it is completely degraded, then it's not going to help them anyway, and they still wouldn't be looking for it. But a complete sample can be used to rule out. But and true, they can. Problematically, though, in doing that, if that's what ends up happening, then we end up with potential matches. So when we're going back to like the markers, like I said, I don't want to go too far, but let's say there's 9 markers, and they end up pulling out DNA from a Patrick Westfall, and those markers match, but the other they don't have the other ones to match. That would not be enough to do anything with it. So that's a huge resource that they would be wasting by doing that. Plus, not to mention, they would be giving that, they have to give that over in discovery. And if those markers match at all, then you have exculpatory evidence right there. Yeah, that would be really tough. Not that it wouldn't be done, because it technically would, but it would be tough on them.
Offender is going to behaving after the crime, not just that moment.
Sorry to pause it again, but we do know, based on the defense filings about the depositions from law enforcement, that there is no DNA or fingerprinting that matches Richard Allen. So keep that in mind also. So even if they're using it to rule out, I mean, they would technically have ruled him out then.
Moment in the video, but also, hey, this is what this guy's going to be doing, and maybe somebody out there has knowledge that would fit that post-offense behavior. So this is where I do think the investigating authorities really need to clean up what has been put out to the public to make sure that that is accurate, to get the tips that are going to be more efficacious, if that's the right word.
Define efficacious.
But something in which.
It's also interesting, Patrick Westfall did live in Delphi, and according to Paul Holes, the person would have moved out of town. You have Brett Holder, who ends up moving, getting rid of his car, and doing all of those things. You have Patrick Westfall, who does end up moving out of Delphi, and yet you have Richard Allen, who continuously just lived in Delphi, going to work at CBS.
You don't want garbage tips coming in, and so right now you have a guy that looks like he's 19 and another guy that's maybe in his mid-30s to mid-40s, very different. There's some similarities between them. Basically, half of Delphi, the males and half of Delphi probably would fit somewhere between a blend of these two composites. You want the public to focus in so you get more accurate tips, something that is worthwhile pursuing.
And Libby had the wherewithal to record on her cell phone mic. We've discussed it, and you thought she was thinking, okay, this guy's a little creepy, and you thought she would think, I'm going to bring it home and show you.
Yeah, that obviously, if they wouldn't have been murdered, this is exactly, I'm sure, what she'd have done. She'd have said, hey, Grandpa, look at this. There's a creepy guy out there. But back to the 2 sketches, my wife, Becky, she put it very well, is I think some of the reason that there are such a difference in those is, and I don't know exactly who was out there, saw people that day, but obviously there was a couple people that saw this person dressed in this fashion. If it was a younger person, did they look at that person and say, oh, they're old, or was it an older person and said, hey, that person really looks young? Yep. And so, and a lot of times when people ask me about this, I'll say, when's the last time you stopped and got gas in your car and the person on the next side of you was getting gas? What did he look like? What was he dressed in? Right? How was he dressed? Mm-hmm. Everybody stops in here and gets gas. We pay too much for it. But but think about that, and try to capture that image. You stopped and got gas yesterday. What did that person look like that was across from you pumping gas? Do you remember? Can you do it well enough to do a sketch?
Mm-hmm. And that's part of assessing the veracity of the sketch is,
right.
Did the witness, stand there and talk to this man for a period of time?
Right.
Or were they just, passing by? And that is what I think, what is the confidence that investigating and theyres have in either sketch. But to put two sketches out there and say, well, it could be a blend between these two, I think is very confusing without context. And that's where I think the tips now just become diluted.
And that is the goal, to get that tip in. And how much do you think the reward, does that kind of boost the tips, or do you think that's, if they're a family member or they know someone, will that give them the extra thing they need to do so? Because it's now at $325,000.
It really depends on the circumstances of the individuals that know something about the case. Oftentimes, when you have crimes in which, reward monies, which generally don't range into the life-changing values, right? You're talking $10,000, $25,000, $100,000. Even to some people, that's a huge amount of money. And if they know something, they're now balancing, okay, the risk to themselves by reporting what they know.
So I just have a question. If one of these eyewitnesses, Betsy Blair, Sarah Carbaugh, Rayleigh Voorhees, if any of these witnesses actually ID Richard Allen, do they get the reward money? How does that work? I mean, they're the ones who are, pressured into giving sketches. Wouldn't that be the tip that they're going to use? No? I mean, that's the tip they kept telling the public about over and over again. DB. Siri, what is 300K divided by 61?
Versus getting that money. In this case, don't know anything about the offender, don't know his social circumstances, social circles, but in my experience.
I say this all the time too, my King of Kings, like, how does it not frustrate the shit out of people, the public, about when we hear things like that Elvis Field's sister was doing everything she could for essentially a year trying to get them to pay attention to her because her brother was confessing to these murders, and then she had to go to her friend, who ultimately goes to, I think it was either Murphy or Ferenczi, it was one of them, to get them to interview her brother. Like, if we didn't have an arrest, if there wasn't a Richard Allen right now, what would people think about Elvis Fields, Patrick Westphal, Brad Holder, the fact that there was search warrants that were written up and never executed, the fact that there is these tips from this sister saying, hey, my brother keeps confessing to this crime in different ways over and over again and tried to give me a bloody blue jacket. If there was no arrest of Richard Allen, would people not just lose their ever-loving minds that we lost 70 days worth of interviews, that we just ignored all of this? How do people not just go? Obviously, there is such incompetence in law enforcement that the list just keeps going on. It's not like there's just the mistake of 70 videos. There's just constants over and over and over again. And I have on the Prezi all the different times that Doug Tobe Lesenby continuously said, we're going back to the beginning. We're going to go through these tips and then we're going to go back to the beginning. And then we went back to the beginning, and, over and over and over again. I don't get it. I would think that people who are looking for justice would go like, holy crap, how did these investigators completely just screw this all up? How do we not have any of this? All the search warrant stuff were given to the unified command from Click, Ferenczi, and Murphy and that FBI task force. And then Murphy testified that he doesn't know what they did with it. No idea. They didn't go get Patrick Westphal's phone. They didn't go search Elvis Field's house. None of it. Yeah, and now we don't have, there's supposedly a written confession to the chaplain, but nobody knows where the written confession is. Somebody just said that in chat. Here it is, Joanna. Yeah. Can't find it. It's just gone. We call those lies, T. So that's what I'm wondering. So who would get the reward money then? Would it go to one of these women, one of these girls? Yeah, how do you go back to the beginning? That's a great question. How do you go back to the beginning when you've lost 70 days worth of those interviews? And you never even bother to go back and re-interview them. You don't even bother to go back and get that interview again just to make sure you have it. I just think, I mean, if this was my family, like, and I think everybody just goes, it's okay because we think Richard Allen's the right guy. Like, it's okay because we think Richard Allen did it. So it doesn't matter that everything for 7 years was a complete fucking nightmare in the investigation. Like, it's okay because we think they got the right guy.
Especially now that this case is so high profile, a reward is going to encourage a lot of people to throw tips in just in the chance that there's enough overlap in facts that they could be considered as providing something. And then that just dilutes the pool. You know, it's very...
Or does Dan Doolin get it because he's the one who took the information?
Very, very rare for a reward in this type of case to actually pay off, if you will, and generate a tip that solves the case.
Well, I do want to open it up to questions. We have about 7 minutes left. Those who have any questions want to come up and ask. Come on up.
Hi, this is a question from Paul. The clip that was shown at the beginning, where this person pretending to be Anthony Schatz or whatever was talking to the reporter, he said something I found curious. He said he gave a DNA sample and hair follicle. And I'm wondering, you know, as a forensics guy, I mean, I would assume they'd do a cheek swab. So, and I know you can only speculate. What would they want? I mean, I don't know the status of current hair science medicine, but does that tell you anything? Did that seem curious to you at all, or am I just kind of...
No, absolutely. You know, typically if you're in this day and age to get a DNA reference standard from somebody you're investigating, you're getting an oral swab. If the search warrant also authorized the collection of hair samples, and the hair sample could be head hair, it could be pubic hair, it could be arm hair, and it all depends. When that's been authorized, that tells me that at the crime scene, off the victim's bodies or nearby, that they found human hair that they need to do a comparison to. And that's the only reason to do that. So again, don't know any particulars about this case, but that tells me that if they have a
badass American, how do you know those things? How do you know it? Allen did it, face the facts and truth, the case is closed. How do you know that? I mean, we don't even have the evidence yet. I mean, you can believe that he's the right guy, that's sure, but how do you know that?
Hair that is foreign to Abby and Libby in this day and age, we can get to...
He confessed 60 times in different ways of telling people he killed multiple other people and that he shot them in the back. And that makes sense. I don't get that.
DNA, even if it's not, doesn't have its root. Back in the day, you had to have a root.
He admitted to a crime that he didn't actually commit. This is my problem with this whole thing. He admitted it and it's recorded. So he says, I shot the girls in the back, which means then he had to have killed them. It doesn't make sense. And there's nothing that's filmed. Everything filmed has no audio. So that's out the window right there. He also confessed that he killed his mom, his wife, and his daughter. It just doesn't make sense to me like that. I don't know how you case close it like that. I get why you use those things to form an opinion. And so by no means am I saying like you can't have that opinion. Absolutely you can. I just don't know how you case close it with that, knowing everything else that we know. Does that, I just don't get it. I mean, and if we're talking about confessions, Keegan Kline confessed to it and it's recorded. It's on video. Keegan Kline says his dad did it and he was there with him. Elvis Fields admits it to 2 of his family members, so he confessed. So are they all involved? Is this like a Tony, Keegan, Elvis Fields, Richard Allen thing? I don't get how it's case closed. Especially when we haven't had a trial. I mean, it's definitely not.
the nuclear DNA on it. Now, with the sensitivity of the genealogy, the sequencing equipment, we would not only be able to get DNA, but identify through the genealogy tool whose hair that was. And so that's one of those things that I would want to know. What is going on with...
There is audio on those, but what they were saying was that there's video of him confessing, but there isn't, because they said in court that there was videos, but there's no audio that goes with those videos. Like when they're following him around with the camcorder, they don't have any audio. So there's supposedly audio of his phone calls, and there's some of these quote unquote confessions are supposedly on audio. Some are only on transcripts based on whatever company is which. We also were told by both sides that the confession to Kathy and his mom is generic, essentially not using the same word on both sides, but that it's not a confession of the details. So then we get to the hearings these last 3 days, or the 3 days of hearings from the last set, where we hear that he confessed to using, a CVS box cutter. So now people are like, okay, well, since he confessed to that, everybody and their mother who thinks he's guilty is doing everything they can to try to show or prove that the injuries to the girls were made from a box cutter. And we don't even have that information. There's no way to show that. We have no idea the size of the wounds on Abby. And if we're just going to use Libby, it doesn't match up. Not to me, it doesn't. And we hear, which we have not heard from the ME, but we hear that the autopsy says that it's a serrated blade. Now, not that box cutters don't have serrated blades, but I can tell you right now, CVS isn't just carrying around serrated blades. It doesn't make any sense. They're box cutters. For what the purpose of what CVS sells, they're not just carrying around serrated box cutter blades. And I'll speak from experience. I don't know why Rick Snay has anything to do with my channel. So Rick Snay doing whatever Rick Snay chooses to do, more power to him. That has nothing to do with anything. Hi, Sniper. It's also one of those, like, come in and just randomly just say shit over and over again, and I don't get that. It's not case closed. If it was case closed, then we would have already had a trial, or he would have already pled guilty. So, no more sidetracking. Go on with your bad self, and you can think whatever you want. I don't care if Rick Snay's done. What does that matter to me? You know how many people quit the Delphi case every other day and then come back after they're done?
Collecting hair samples from individuals that they're looking at.
They can. They will be able to tell us. They won't be able to tell a specific knife in general, but they'll have indicators to be able to tell you what type of knife or what types of knives. Same kind of thing that we were talking about earlier. Like, you'll be able to rule out that it's obviously not this type of blade.
I think that the police have more video or audio evidence that they have not shared, and if so, why wouldn't they now after 5 years?
I can speak to that. The investigators are doing their job. It's not a cold case, and they're keeping that, knowing that that's what the person who did this also knows. So in respect to the investigation. If you could state your name and then ask a question.
Hi. With our obsession and consumption of true crime, we've learned that offenders escalate in their crimes. And I know you can't speak to the evidence, but do you feel that this was an an advancement in his crimes, and that he's done this before? And any opinion on why he left the cell phone behind?
So as far as, the evolution of the offender, yes, there is the possibility. And this is where, if I had more information, it's really trying to assess, what type of offender are we dealing with? Are we dealing with a fantasy motivated predator? If that's the case, then there is a chance that there's other crimes that are before and after. But it's not going to be two girls. This happened to be a case of opportunity for him. If he is attacking, he could be just singling out single girls. He could be going after adults. You know, we have crossover offenders, and they don't just, you know, like what, you know, the kind of the myth is that they have a victim of a certain type. You know, I talk about a serial killer, Phil Hughes, and he has, you know, 11-year-old girl. He's got, you know, people that are much older. This is something serial killers do choose a variety of victims of a variety of different ages. However, with these cases that have been solved since Golden State Killer, using the genealogy tool, we are seeing more of these one-off offenders that commit what looks like a fantasy-motivated crime, but then don't do it again. You know, and that's something that is relatively new to the behavioral aspects of these offenders, and that needs to be studied more to see, is there any way to discern that from the behaviors left at the scene? And I don't think there's going to be, you know, so it's really hard to predict. In my estimation, with the little bit that I know on this case, I think it's possible that this individual has other cases, but it's not, I mean, some people focus in, well, are there other, you know, 2 victims?
Right. Rosie said that the letter to the chaplain, the defense brought it up and said that they don't have it. They said they don't have it. McClellan said he hasn't seen it. So maybe the chaplain has it. Well, that's a problem. So if they're trying to use, if the state is trying to use this letter to the chaplain as part of his confessions, they have to have it to make it evidence. And then they have to turn it over in discovery. Otherwise, then the letter to the chaplain is worthless at this point. It means nothing. It's not there. And if there really is a letter and it's not collected, then that's going to be a problem for the prosecution too. So I don't know why they would even try to bring it up if it's not something they actually have.
Across the nation. No, you can't do that. This possibly is probably the only case that he has with 2 victims.
Yeah, you did mention in your book that serial killers can stop, and they do stop. And as you said, it needs to be investigated. I wish we had more time.
Thank
Mike,
you.
I do want you.
Thank you. And to the families, I am so sorry for your loss.
Great.
Mike, I do want to discuss the girls, to end on that with 2 minutes left. What would you want the CrimeCon audience to know about Libby and Abby, and just what you want them to do now with the information?
Oh boy. What do I want you to know about Abby and Libby? Well, think about everything that's been lost in their lives, the impacts that they could have made. They had so much to live for. Our families lost so much. I mean, we missed out on the proms and the graduations and the college. And I was just getting ready to teach Libby how to drive. We just started going up and down the driveway. But remember all the things that they could have done and the stuff that was taken away. We have a perpetrator out there that did this, you know, and that's truly who's at fault here. But remember the girls, you know, and we're building a memorial park for them, and so they'll never be forgotten. Sorry to take so much time.
And Paul, I do want to thank you for your expertise in talking about this, because that is the goal.
So that's Paul Holes at CrimeCon in 2022. Ironically, it got posted to YouTube on October 31st. So just an interesting little side. Let me see if this is the next one. No, this is the one I want to do. So this is after the press conference on October 31st of 2022. And Susan Hendricks, again, is talking with Doug Carter, and then she is talking with Paul Holes. So he does talk about what Doug says. So I'm going to play Doug's too, just so that people aren't like, well, what the heck is he talking about? Even though it's not necessarily relevant to what the information about Paul Holes.
Motivation or some gratification, whatever that might be. But the vast majority of people that did that were trying to do the right thing. And I really do believe that. So it's been a partnership with so many different people, and lifelong relationships have been established.
And something that stood out to me that you did say at that presser is you believe that good outweighs evil. Do you still believe that?
I do. You know, very personally, before my dad died, he made me promise not to become cynical like him. And I was proud to report to him in 2018 that I'm not. And I'm still to this day, and I'm not. I really do believe after all these years in this business and seeing such horror and tragedy, and the list goes on and on and on, that good always, always comes through evil. And today's an example of that.
And I was holding on to that. I still am, because when you see and you think about what Libby did, the bravery that you have spoken of, and hitting record on her cell phone, getting the voice guys down the hill, you've seen much more than the public is privy to. Also, that man, as we're looking at right now, his image and walking on the bridge, there was an outcry of, come on, get this guy. So you've been able to kind of keep us in the know, and also, right, as you mentioned, try to keep yourself above the fray and stay positive too. You're human, as we all know.
I am. It's really important. I've got a great seat on the bus, Susan, to watch such incredible people give of themselves for so many years. And I don't want anybody to think that this is all because of me. It's not even close to that. But I'm the luckiest guy in the world to be able to represent them. But what we can't do is, again, talk about what we think. We must talk about what we know. And now that charges have been filed against Alan, that the days of us talking about what we have are over.
Right.
And everything changes now. But I don't blame people for being frustrated. I don't blame them for wanting to know answers to their questions. But every time I get those kinds of questions, I think of Mike and Becky and Kelsey and Anna and the community. And I'm not about to jeopardize the integrity of this by meeting a news cycle deadline or whatever that might be. But I want to maintain this partnership with our news outlets, and they have been wonderful. They really, really, really have.
Sounds easy to do, not to go with what you think, but what
Any of you guys ever watch like body language people? I love body language people. But you know, one of the biggest things that they always tell you to look for is somebody who's like saying something affirmative, but then they're actually like shaking their head no. So I just watch. This has always caught me.
Now, but I don't blame people for being frustrated. I don't blame them for wanting to know answers to their questions. But every time I get those kinds of questions, I think of Mike and Becky and Kelsey and Anna and the community. And I'm not about to jeopardize the integrity of this by meeting a news cycle deadline or whatever that might be. But I want to maintain this partnership with our news outlets, and they have been wonderful. They really, really, really have.
No, I don't.
Sounds easy to do.
I don't actually want to maintain this relationship with news outlets. I'm really tired of talking to you fucking people.
Not to go with what you think, but what you know. It is a difficult task, as we have seen. Superintendent Doug Carter, thank you.
It's a pleasure. Good to be with you. Thanks.
I want to bring in now Paul Holes, former cold case investigator, host of HLN's Real Life Nightmare, behind the arrest of the Golden State Killer.
So remember, we just had the press conference for the arrest, so that's what this is.
Paul, you know, we've been on a panel together speaking with the family. You've met them. What were your thoughts when watching that presser?
Well, you know, obviously this is an amazing moment in this case. It's been a long time coming. I think, you know, kudos needs to go to Superintendent Carter, Indiana State Police, Carroll County Sheriff's Office for staying on top of it. You know, listening to Superintendent Carter, he obviously has a personal connection with the family, with Libby and Abby. So, you know, this, I completely understand the emotions he's going through. And, you know, I'm going to tell him, you know, this is, even though this is a good moment in the case, in many ways, it's just the beginning. I've experienced that with the Golden State Killer. The trial's coming up. There's going to be a lot of challenges for him, his staff, and the family moving forward.
Yeah, there is so many questions in terms of what led to this guy, what led to the arrest. Was your initial thought, this has got to be DNA?
No, not necessarily. You know, most certainly DNA is a possibility if they reassessed evidence and found DNA that maybe was undiscovered before. Then utilizing modern technology like genealogy could have led to this Allen. You know, he doesn't have any criminal history that would have him up in the FBI's CODIS system. So they would have had to either resort to genealogy or have public tips come in, and then they were able to compare the DNA directly to him. There may be a situation where public tips did come in and they went and confronted him. He made incriminating statements. Maybe he confessed. We don't know that at this point. There's also the possibility that
he thinks that they had a tip that came in. So this is right off the bat. These are his initial thoughts. There's a tip that came in that pointed to Allen, and they took the DNA and matched it straight to Allen. Okay, so obviously we know that that's not the case. Yeah, this is the same guy. This is Paul Holes. The other one he thinks is that they used investigative genetic genealogy and matched the DNA to Richard Allen. We know that's not the case. So
maybe there was a reservoir of digital data that had been undiscovered. And going back to it, they go, oh, here's a guy that is in the location on the day at the time that the victims were there.
A reservoir of data that they had not looked at in 5.5 years, and they go back and they find it, and they start digging through it, and they're like, hey, there was a guy that was there.
So at this point, we just don't know. But there's multiple possibilities of how they could have come across Allen.
Yeah, we don't know because it is sealed at this point. Paul, a lot more to discuss. I know you're going to stick around. Coming up, the big question that came out of that press conference after the charges were announced is because, hey, they want to solidify what will happen in the trial.
Well, that's entirely possible. You have to consider that.
Hold on, let me back it up. So I'm sorry.
More tips now. They're still coming in. Are they looking for someone else in this case? My panel is with me, expert panel. I want to start with former cold case investigator Paul Holes. Paul, do you think that they have their suspect, Richard Allen? Could he be the one and only person they're looking for, and they're keeping this open because, hey, they want to solidify what will happen in the trial?
Well, that's entirely possible. You have to consider that they developed probable cause for an arrest warrant that was reviewed by a prosecutor, reviewed by a judge. The prosecutor decided to charge, based on the information, 2 counts of murder on Allen. And the prosecutor is not looking at this as doesn't meet the standard of probable cause. The prosecutor is going, can I convince a jury of 12 that it is beyond reasonable doubt? Now, they're doing the right thing by holding back details on this case as they continue to flesh out this case. This case is so high profile, the last thing they want is media members going into the community with specific details on this case and starting to conduct interviews, and thereby contaminating a witness pool. Now, I know my assessment on this case, I believe there's a lone offender, but I can't eliminate the possibility that maybe there's an accessory, maybe there's a second person present, and that's part of what the ongoing investigation is about.
Now, I do want to go to HLN investigator producer.
Okay, so there was a piece that I should have shown you before we went to the presser, but I missed it. So I apologize for that. But here is a post that Paul Holes made on his Instagram on October 8th of 2022. It says, I suck at many things, but there's a very narrow area of expertise I'm good at. The photo predicts the future for someone. Stay tuned. And then it's a guy in a jail cell with his little jail outfit on. So this is when people were really up in arms about, like, oh my gosh, like Paul Holes had to have something to do with it, because on October 8th, he makes this post. And then on October, technically the 26th, but 28th, he's arrested. 31st, we have a press conference.
Producers Barbara McDonald, Drew Iden, you both have followed this case as have we from the start. You were in the room today when they made that announcement. So what was your reaction when we finally heard, yes, someone is in custody? Not only are they in custody, they're from Delphi.
You know, Susan, I think one of the words that comes to mind is relief, and I especially think that is a feeling that was palpable from the folks here in town. And you know, it's interesting because for 6 years, these folks in this town have been trying to prepare themselves for the knowledge that an arrest A, was going to come, and B, could very well be someone local. And I still think that 6 years of preparing for that did not prepare them. And it's interesting to talk to folks around town. And so, you know, we talked to Cynthia Rossi, who, we've talked to her throughout the podcast. Denise. And Denise. And Denise's daughter, Cynthia, was friends with Abby and Libby. And she talked about kind of learning about this arrest. Here's what she had to say.
When I started to piece together and I saw his picture, and I had just talked to him a week before, I felt disgusted. I thought I was going to throw up. It was horrifying. And how close he lives to my house. All his neighbors that are good friends of mine. He was a dog sitter for one of my good friends. They had no idea. There's like a handful of stores in Delphi. He works at CVS. Everybody goes to CVS.
Yep. It's just weird. He was a dog sitter. You guys know that?
So, you know, you can hear the trauma in her voice, and I think that it's important to remember there was obviously a trauma associated with this crime, and now there's a trauma for the acceptance that there's an arrest. And so I think this town is really doing the best that they can to learn that they now are taking kind of a left turn, and this is moving into a new phase.
And Barb, what was it like being in the room there in the aftermath of what you heard?
Susan, you know, one of the things I noticed was that this press conference was not a celebration, even though they're announcing an arrest, something that people had been waiting for. Superintendent Carter said himself during the press conference, this is not a day to celebrate. I kind of expected more fanfare at this when we got to this point, and it wasn't there, but I do understand they need to be very cautious. They need to be very measured with their words, because we are entering another phase of this that's just as important as the first. Now they have to prove their case.
And you both bring up excellent points in terms of what they thought they would feel and how they actually feel there. And it's just such a shift. I want to bring in Steve Moore, law enforcement analyst. Steve, all the information that led to this arrest, it is sealed. Were you surprised by that?
Not at all. I mean, that's the one thing you would want to do immediately when you have a case that has so much specific evidence. There's a concept called culpable knowledge, and culpable knowledge means that there is information that is known only to the killer and the police. Say, in this case, hypothetically, he was eating a candy bar at some point and dropped a wrapper on the ground, say a Milky Way bar. Only the killer and the police would know that. So if you brought out the entire warrants, set of warrants, if you brought out all the information and told everybody this.
So he's talking about, like, if Richard Allen says that he did have a Milky Way bar when he was at the bridge, and all of a sudden there is a Milky Way wrapper at the scene, and nobody else would know that. And it's similar to I was on Dan's I think it was last week or over the weekend, I don't remember when it was, and we were talking about it, and I said, like, if Richard Allen, like, say in his interview with Jerry Holman or anybody, and they were like, yeah, we've all heard that there's like a Gatorade bottle out there, right? So if like Jerry Holman's like, yeah, we found this Powerade bottle and we know we're going to match the DNA to yours, and he's like, and then he turns around and he says it's a Gatorade bottle, like, is that enough? Is that enough to go, okay, well, how did he know it was a Gatorade bottle when Holman told him it was a Powerade bottle? Or, you know what I mean? So it was, I mean, that's kind of similar. It's like like little things like that would be more important to me. And I can only speak for myself. You guys all have you're all grown people. You have your own opinions. I can only speak for myself. But that stuff to me would be more important than these weird confessions of I did this stuff that I actually never ever did. Like I never actually killed my wife, my mom, and my daughter. I never actually I never shot the girls in the back. I never did those things. So to me, like, it's more, that would be actually a bigger deal. I don't know why. I can just tell you that if he knew information, like weird information like that, it would, like, how would he know that if he wasn't actually at the scene? Yeah, those dang candy bars. You gotta go with the whatchamacallit. That's the best candy bar there is. It's a whatchamacallit.
You could not use his knowledge that the candy bar wrapper was there and that it was a Milky Way absent it being published in the Indianapolis Star or something, that's information that only he has. And that becomes very powerful information in court.
Steve, what's the strategy of announcing this on Friday and then waiting until Monday to make the announcement?
Mm-hmm.
That is, I've seen people put people in on Friday just to get them off the street before a Monday arraignment. But why they didn't, I think basically you want your ducks in a row before you make statements to the press. And they probably wanted him off the street sooner. Obviously wanted him off the street sooner than later. So you put him in, and then you spend the weekend deciding, what are we going to keep?
Absolutely, you can answer.
Sealed. What are we going to tell people? Plus, you have probably a lot of family.
It wasn't a rotated left, it was two lefts. There was, like Holman's like, it was two right Twixes, and he's like, no. I don't eat the right Twix, I only eat the left Twixes. So get your shit together.
Members to discuss, to communicate with, and to notify. You don't want them finding out from a press conference that their niece or their nephew or their aunt is the one. That's right. You don't want to find out that.
Right. There's so much to consider, considering all of the attention, so much to talk about with this expert panel. More after the break. From Delphi, Indiana. Want to bring in our panel of experts. Want to get to Joey Jackson, attorney, HLN legal analyst. Joey, we keep hearing protecting the integrity of the investigation. So the probable cause document, that is sealed.
I think that you'd have to compare the striation marks of one that's been eaten to one that was left that fell out of the package. It's the only way that you could actually find that out. You have to have one eaten and one that just randomly was left there.
Is that common?
Yeah, Susan, good evening to you. The bottom line here is that you want to seal that document because there's sensitive information and you don't want to impair the investigation. It's not common in as much as we see in a generalized prosecution, which lacks this public interest and is not unique like this one is. Generally, someone gets arrested, a probable cause document is provided, and
should have gone with the 5-second rule on that one.
We would all know and be able to examine and evaluate the evidence that's there. Just backing up briefly, probable cause is an important, I think, no, because we all wanted to know at the press conference today, Susan, what is the information specifically? You took items from the house. What specific items were there? What evidentiary value do they have? Is there forensic analysis or other things? We don't know that, but I get and understand why they did it very briefly. Why? Because you don't want to impair the rights of the defendant also. You can't condemn him. At this point, yes, he's arrested, but there's a far cry from an arrest to an actual conviction. That information will ultimately be challenged by defense attorneys. If it holds up, he'll be convicted by a jury. If it doesn't, that's another matter.
Yeah, excellent point, Casey Jordan, attorney, criminologist, HLN contributor. When you hear about the arrest, Richard Allen, and you think about it, 50 years old now, if he is guilty, mid-40s at the time, does someone just decide one day to do this brutal attack, brutal murder of two young girls? Could he have done something like this in the past? Will they look into it?
Oh, they're definitely looking into it. Now, let's just kind of regroup because there is so much that we don't know. But let's assume that the murderer did not really plan it. He probably had a very rich fantasy life and had been thinking about doing terrible things like this to young girls for quite a while. But on that day, in broad daylight, in a public setting, this would have been an act of impulsivity, most likely. And afterwards, I've interviewed many killers who say in the days afterwards, they are full of panic. They're convinced everyone's going to know. They're expecting the police to come around the corner at any time and arrest them. But when that...
that is facts. That is absolute facts right there. The reliability of the quick striation analysis is questionable after it has been transported in a pocket. You know that there's going to be like videos made now of people looking to see if what's in his pocket on the bridge is potentially a Twix bar.
That doesn't
like a king size.
happen. They calm down and then they just play the routine role. Now, if he moved out of town, what would he tell his wife? If he quit his good job at CVS, how would that look to the neighbors, the people that he's dog sitting for? His best routine was to act like nothing was going on, keep the job, keep the house, keep the wife.
So Casey Jordan thinks like staying there actually makes the most sense. Why most other people who are into some type of profiling are all saying that the person would have completely changed and probably would have left. Could someone catch me up on the Twix thing? I'm so lost. There was an analogy on if, let's say the killer was eating a Milky Way bar and dropped the wrapper. And in an interview, the killer confesses based on like an investigator saying that there was a Snickers wrapper out there. And the killer's like, it was a Milky Way wrapper, like is like defensive of like, what? No, it was this, not that. And it's weird because I had just used that type of analogy with Powerade and Gatorade. So now we've gone into what is the best type of candy bar? And then two, if it is actually a Twix bar versus a Milky Way or a Snickers, do they have striation marks? Could you compare the left one and the right one in a package? And it's just taken on a life of its own in chat, Yellow Jacket. And so we have an unspent Twix compared with one that has been bitten. And we also know that Richard Allen was a dog sitter.
Don't do anything radical, and it worked for him for 5 years. So like everybody else, I'm really interested in knowing what exact evidence they have that led to this arrest, because he has been hiding in plain sight the entire time.
Exactly. The FBI, Casey, posted a flyer asking for the public's help, posted it in many locations.
So we talk about like overused statements like the unseasonably warm day. This hiding in plain sight is another one that bugs me. Do they expect that the person is going to go and hide like in the mountains? Like how many people do they expect are not going to just be out in plain sight? So even if like the person did move, are they in hiding, or are they still in plain sight? Like this is one of those like you can't be wrong when you say it. You know, I don't know. That's another one that's like an overly used statement for Delphi.
Including the CVS store where Richard Allen worked.
If anybody tries to bring a Twix into trial, Judge Gola is going to have none of that. She's taking it. She's going to take it, she's going to confiscate it, and it will probably go into the garbage. What if you find a candy bar that just had a big bite taken out of the middle of it? That's a psychopath. You know what? I might agree with you, but what if it's like a Reese's peanut butter cup? You know, those commercials where they used to like people would poke the hole through the middle and they'd eat that first. All right, I'm going to let this play for a minute. I got to go take care of a tiny human real quick, and I'll be right back.
Day in and day out, saw it all the time. He is, of course, presumed innocent. But what are your thoughts on the fact that he stayed there in Delphi, as you mentioned?
Well, think about what would have happened if he went into the pharmacy to work and he saw the poster that the FBI put up, I think on the door. I think it was probably posted right over his shoulder in the pharmacy area. What would you think if your coworker is taking that down, especially given how the community has really, really rallied around this investigation? I mean, how would that look if you take the flyer down? If you say, hey, I want to transfer to a CVS in a whole different state. Mostly the fact that we know he lives in that house with his wife. What do you tell your spouse about why you suddenly want to up and leave, why you're taking flyers down? That would be consciousness of guilt. So it had to be unnerving for him to have those flyers all around with a sketch that looks almost exactly like him. But all he had to do was play it cool, lay low, just go through his regular routine. Don't take flyers down. And again, he wasn't on anyone's radar that I know of other than the police.
Absolutely not. Very brazen. Jean Casares, HLN correspondent. So let's say goes to the next stage, as we heard from Superintendent Doug Carter, that we are going into that stage. And considering the jury pool, Delphi being less than 3,000 people. And also I want to discuss murder in terms of first degree, second degree. There's just murder in the state of Indiana. Loaded question. But first, are you able to find a jury when it goes to trial?
You know, I think that's an important question, and I think that may be one reason why they did the extraordinary thing, I believe, in sealing the charging document. The probable cause affidavit, it is routinely sealed because it has so much information in it. The charging document, and of course, maybe Indiana is different, but it's normally the name, date of birth, and the statute of the crime that they are being charged with. You don't get a lot of information usually in this, but they, I am sure, want this case tried in Delphi. This is their case, their community. They don't want to have to go to another part of Indiana. So they want the evidence in a pristine form. And they don't want, as someone else said, they don't want potential witnesses really to the point where they're not going to give credible testimony because so much information is out.
Absolutely. And I know, Jean, you've covered cases like this for years or similar. Have you ever seen an investigation where law enforcement makes the families wait 3 full days before announcing information to the press? Nothing in this case has seemed, quote unquote.
Because it would have been better if he had removed all the flyers instead of just leaving them up there. So I think that's the end of Paul Holes. If you guys want to watch the rest of this, if anybody's interested in watching the rest of it, Paul Holes isn't in it, but I have no problem playing it. Just if you want to watch the rest of it, put a 1 in chat really quick and I'll just play the rest. Otherwise, I'm going to move on to the next section about Paul Holes. Just like I don't. If you don't want to watch the rest of it, put a 2. There you go. Okay, so you guys are done with that part. Absence of evidence is proof of guilt. Next. Okay, perfect. Okay, so let me find a different. Let me go back to Paul Holes here for just a second. Just so it's a better screenshot. Everybody's like, 2, we're done listening to them. We don't want to listen to them anymore. No more. Okay, so I'm going to read you guys a couple pages from the chapter in Susan Hendricks's book. Once again, it is Down the Hill. And this is chapter 15 where she is talking with Paul. So I'm going to read this to you guys. Are you all high? We all want candy bars now, though, I can tell you that. Ooh, Rolos are good. Are Rolos considered a candy bar, though? I mean, that is the question. Okay, so investigative insights with Paul Holes. Though law enforcement insisted that the tip line was still open and Richard Allen is presumed innocent until proven guilty, I found myself getting restless as the winter months wore on. There were still so many unanswered questions. Perhaps the most glaring one was the reason no one was arrested for close to 6 years. How could it be that Richard Allen inserted himself into the investigation soon after the murders by telling a law enforcement official he was on the bridge that day, yet no one ever followed up? The explanation swirling around the internet was that it had been a clerical error, that an FBI civilian employee had mislabeled or misfiled Richard Allen's interview information. Could anybody tell me what report it actually states that the tip was filed or deemed unfounded or however it was changed? Does anybody know what actual document that was in? Or why the public thinks that? But almost immediately, the FBI responded to those claims, explaining that the implication that an alleged clerical error by an FBI employee caused years of delay in identifying this defendant is misleading. Our review of the matter shows FBI employees correctly followed established procedures. This is where I'm at, Miku's headphones. That's what I'm trying to figure out. Where did that actually come from? The conflation that the Orion database functions like a rusty filing cabinet is bizarre. It was on the news. If anybody knows where that is or finds the source of that, can somebody send it to me? I'm putting together another live, and I'm looking for that information and cannot find it on any. I can't find it anywhere. Do you think it was in a news article? Yeah. If anybody can, that clerical error goes back to Murder Sheet and their investigative source on December 1st of 2022. Is that the date of their podcast, All Eyes? And hello, by the way. If you guys find anything on that, send it to me. Let me know what sources you guys have, if you could, if you don't mind. Okay, so So FBI makes their statement, which we know that. With law enforcement's wall of silence reinforced post-arrest, I felt compelled to reach out to Paul Holes, an expert who knew the ins and outs of how these kinds of investigations worked, to figure out how likely it was that the family would finally get the justice they'd been deprived of for so long. Paul had also met with Abby and Libby's family several times. We'd even done a panel with them on stage about 6 months before Alan was taken into custody. He felt as invested in the case as I did. And early on, he had personally reached out to Detective Holman, offering his help if law enforcement should ever need it. With his impressive track record as a cold case investigator back in Costa County, I thought they'd be foolish not to take him up on it. Since retiring from active duty, Holes has connected with victims and families across the country, like Libby and Abby's, who are still seeking answers and resolutions in their own case. He understands more than most how the various components of crime, the investigative element, the clinical element, even the emotional element, can overlap and butt heads with one another. I knew he'd had a level-headed theory about what could have possibly led to Alan's arrest and what the long legal process ahead might look like. I reached out to Paul in January, 85 days after Richard Allen's arrest, and asked him what he thought about the man in custody, someone who had apparently been hiding in plain sight for close to 6 years by that point. Paul, I'm so eager to hear your opinion about things, considering your expertise, everything you've been involved with, the investigation process, forensics, DNA. I began with the Delphi case right now, where we are. It's still early on, and you know Richard Allen is considered innocent until proven guilty. There's still so little we know about the crime scene, even the cause of death with Abby and Libby. What do you think it was that finally led to an arrest? Well, Paul replied, what we do know is that Alan's name came up early on in the investigation. He admitted to having been at the location, not necessarily where Abby and Libby's bodies were found, but at the location near the bridge. And the strongest evidence that they have publicly released is the live round that had been chambered through a gun, and a firearms examination showed that that live round was chambered through Alan's gun, a SIG 226 gun, one that I'm familiar with. They obviously have more than that, and at this point in time, I think that that's one thing I want to emphasize, is that people are looking at the affidavit, the probable cause statement, to get an arrest warrant going. Is that all they've got? Well, no, it's not. They just need to be able to present enough information to a magistrate in order for him to be convinced that there is probable cause to order a peace officer to go arrest Alan. And that's what they did in the affidavit. I do believe that they have other information, most likely electronic information, because Alan did say he was at this location with his cell phone. And there is technology available to authorities that is not cellular based, but Google locational based, that can really finally pinpoint Alan's cell phone within this park area up to the bridge and possibly out to where the girls' bodies were found. And I do think that they likely have that kind of information. The kind that contradicts Alan's statements of what he was doing or what he said he was doing at the park. The type of technology can literally show Alan's cell phone coming up and meeting up with the smart device that Abby and Libby were carrying. And I believe it was a cell phone. Susan says it was. And Paul says, and then watching these two phones move to the location to where Abby and Libby's bodies were found, if they have that kind of information coupled with the physical evidence of the firearm, and likely they will get more evidence now that he has been arrested. DNA testing is underway, I'm sure, plus other types of investigative processes. They're building a very strong case against Alan, is my best estimate at this point. So even though the crime took place in 2017, the technology they can use could bring those cell phones together and track Richard Allen if it was him to Abby and Libby, I asked. Yes, he said, and nodded. In this technology, it's called a geofence. This is a technology that relies on Google location services. So if these cell phones have their location services turned on, and if you're using something like Google Maps or other types of apps that require it to be placed within the geography of wherever you're at, this is something that Google has kept all the way back to about 2008, 2009 timeframe. So it is a technology that they could look at even if they didn't think to use it in 2017. And then in 2022, they're going, oh, geez, we could use that. Very likely that data will still be present. And when I think about it, Alan all of a sudden just came to light. Well, it wasn't based on the firearms round at the scene. There's nothing else that happened. And it likely wasn't DNA because he wasn't in the FBI's CODIS system. That's where I believe it's the high-tech information. I think you might be onto something I said, just thinking back. And this is just speculation considering how little we know. But when I was at the bridge for the first time with Kelsey, she looked to the left and said, oh my gosh, this might be from Libby. It was a little box with a treasure inside. It was this little baby. And she told me they used to go geocaching. Now this man and had a daughter their age, not their age, she was older. It's that similar to all that with the technology in geocaching in terms of location. To a point, yes, Holes replied. Now, I'm not familiar with how individuals are utilizing their smart devices to do this geocaching process. I'm kind of familiar with the game in terms of how that particular thing works. But in essence, we used to do this when I was on the FBI task force before I retired. We had a crime analyst who was formerly out of the military, highly skilled, and he would be able to get this locational information from victims' phones, suspects' phones, and then map it. And you literally see the victim driving around, stopping, getting out to a certain location in a city, and the suspect driving around and getting out and moving up and meeting up with the victim. And then there's date and time stamps with this information. And for these types of cases, they were typically gang-related cases with shootings. And so now, in particular, in a particular city, we had the shot spotter. So when shots are fired, the loud reports of a gun, the system would immediately register a gunshot was fired. So we have a date and a timestamp there. And that could now be all married up with a visual map that could be presented in court for the investigators. And so I would imagine, if I'm correct, and they did do a geofence, there might be Abby and Libby walking up to one end of the bridge and going onto the bridge, and then Alan's cell phone possibly going on the bridge. And we also had the video with the date and timestamp on that. And so that could merge all of this together. And it would be absolutely compelling to show he is the man on the bridge and he is the one responsible for their homicides. So let me see what you guys are saying so far. Oh, is he on that podcast too, Greenie? I didn't know that. I didn't put that one in here. I know the other two. One's like defunct now. FBI has all that info. Good luck getting it from them now. That's not a geofence. That's called a pen register. Genius. So now, if you were here from the beginning of the live and I said I've been going down these rabbit holes, this is part of the reason why. Hey, Joe Schmo. Nick openly admits that he is not a cell phone tech expert, and in the same breath condemns the defense cell phone evidence as bunk. Yes, he acts like he's a cell phone expert, but then he says, I'm not a cell phone expert. Exactly. Got to have Google location history turned on. Never going to catch me in a geofence. The killer is between the ages of 18 and 78. However, they might appear younger or older. And if you put them together, they'll end up being the same person. Well, we're going to do a live on geofencing once I can complete my research so that I can have an idea of what I'm talking about. But there's just a couple things with Paul Holes that I found very interesting in connection with this whole geofence stuff that happens to be a big topic lately around the YouTube streets. So let me go to the next one. They must be really close friends because there's a lot of interviews between the two of them. Never let your heroes become podcasters. Okay, so this one is from Susan Hendrick's YouTube channel. She has 46 subscribers, so go give her a sub. Let's give her a thumbs up on this video. So this is just a little excerpt of her conversation with Paul Holes.
They're building a very strong case against Allen is my best estimate at this point.
And so, Paul, even though the crime took place February 13th, as you know, 2017, the technology they can use now could bring those cell phones together and track Richard Allen if it was him to Libby and Abby?
Yes, in this technology, it's called a geofence. This is a technology that, again, it relies on Google location services. So if these cell phones have their location services turned on, and if you're using something like Google Maps or other types of apps that require it to be placed within, the geography of wherever you're at, that is something that Google has kept, all the way back to about 2008, 2009 timeframe. So it is a technology that if they didn't think to use it in 2017, and then in 2022, they're going, oh, geez, we could use that. Very likely that data was still present. And when I think about, he all of a sudden just came to light, well, it wasn't based on the firearms round at the scene. There's something else that happened, and it likely wasn't a DNA because he wasn't in the FBI's CODIS system. That's where I believe it's the high-tech information.
Yeah.
Okay, so there's still more to the chapter, but he goes more into like the DNA and the forensic side of what they could and couldn't do with DNA. But since that's not really kind of where I'm going with it, I'm not going to go too far into it. So here is we'll talk about this too. So when it comes to the geofencing stuff, this, like I said, this has kind of been like a big topic on the YouTube and social media streets lately. And one of the reasons I've been doing as much research as I have on it is because I don't understand what the difference would be from doing a geofence in 2017 to doing another one in the later years if they already did it, which according to Paul Holes, even if, and from my understanding, what he's talking about isn't even really a geofence, it's a different type of way to put all this together, which is, like I said, I'm trying to do my research so I can actually talk about this like I know what I'm talking about. But if he believes that there's any type of geofencing that is this big tech saver, right? So, we talk about DNA. We already have from the depositions that there's no DNA that ties Richard Allen to the scene. Now, are they just picking that out and then somewhere else they say there is? Maybe. I doubt that. That doesn't make sense to me. But some will say that just because the defense put it out, it's not real. But whatever. I'm going to go with it. So we have no DNA tying Richard Allen to the scene. We have no fingerprints tying Richard Allen to the scene. So what's left is this technology. This would be the big thing that would tie Richard Allen to the scene, right? He says he's on his stock ticker. He's out there walking around. And we've gone over, and I don't know if I still have it up or not, but we've gone over that in the request from Nick in the motion in limine is that he does not want any geofencing. He does not want the defense to be able to bring up any geofencing and or the report from Kevin Horan, who was the one who did the geofencing back in 2017. I think they said they did another geofence in 2019, maybe with the U.S. Marshals. Right. So let's go with this. So if on the 2017 geofence that they do, Richard Allen's phone is not there, right? Even if they do, well, whatever they did in 2019, they wouldn't be calling geofencing. That would have to be something else. Because Nick is specifically saying he doesn't want the defense talking about geofencing and or Kevin Horan's reports. The way that he words it is cannot bring up geofencing. Geofencing is out and or Kevin Horan's reports. Yeah, I have that piece. That's part of what I'm going to show on the next one too, for that live. So if he doesn't want, the celebs are harsh in my buzz. Cleveland, you're funny. So if Nick doesn't want geofencing in, then it doesn't make sense that Richard Allen's phone is there. It doesn't make sense that Richard Allen's phone is there in 2017, 2019, 2022. No matter when they do this geofence, if he's asking for it to not be used, then Richard Allen's phone would not be there. If there is a piece of evidence, as Paul Holes suggests, then it would make sense that they would want that in. They would put in anything that tied Richard Allen to the crime scene, especially if all they have right now is this unspent round that they're not even sure is going to be enough. Ives was talking about getting cell tower dumps. Right. So this is why, like, I'm trying to put something together that shows the difference in all of these things, because the geofencing is out if it confuses the jury to the truth. But that's the issue. Isn't that the main issue? Is if the geofencing is this great technology that is being used in all these cases and putting people behind bars, why would they be trying to keep it out? If they have Richard Allen there. He handed over his MEID. He didn't have an IMEI, but yes, I get what you're saying. Pretty sure that was sarcasm. Sorry. On paper, RA is the most innocent guy involved in the entire thing. Whole case is wild. So there's a couple other interviews, but they're essentially the same thing. Paul Holes talking about that he thinks what cracked the case is, let me see if I can find the other one really quick. What cracked the case, or what they should use to continue to crack the case, is the geofencing. I don't know if I have the other one up. But there's like 2 more interviews that he does. Another one is like an individual interview at CrimeCon. And it's all about that he thinks the geofencing is going to be the thing. It's going to be the big one. So here is an article from April 4th of 2023 is when it was sent to the subscribers. So it's from beginning of last year. And it's mostly on Paul Holes' role in the Golden State Killer. But he does talk about talks about Peterson, and then it says, and then he talks about the Idaho murders. It says, in addition to Idaho, another case that has dominated headlines and speculation by online sleuths is the 2017 killing of 2 young girls in Delphi, Indiana. Also like the Idaho man, the man who was arrested and charged with murdering 14-year-old Liberty German and 13-year-old Abigail Williams was not among the people considered likely suspects by the true crime fans following the case. So the journalist says, when I jokingly asked Holes whether he was the one who found the resurfaced 2017 police interview with the Delphi suspect, placing him at the scene at the time the girls were kidnapped and killed, I was surprised by his answer. He says, no, but I did, through a producer, ask, because she had a source, have they done geofence? And then within a couple of days after asking that question, they landed on they were kicking in the door on the suspect's house. It says geofencing is a controversial investigative tool that uses smartphone data to identify people within a particular area and time period, as federal authorities did to identify the January 6th rioters at the Capitol. So if he's asking if they did geofence, that would mean that he didn't know that. Said, I'm kind of curious, Hull said, did they do a geofence because he admitted he was at the location with his cell phone and the geofence would literally show him meeting up with the victims and walking away with the victims. There's something that caused them to kick his door in, and it wasn't the live round found by their bodies, even though that was matched back to his gun. They wouldn't have matched that until later. So I'm still kind of curious to see if maybe that suggestion, because there's a reason the U.S. Marshals were at the press conference. You know, this guy wasn't a fugitive. There's a reason why they had the feds there. And who does geofence a lot? The Marshals do. I bet the geofence is what led them to that guy's house. Says, could be coincidental, Holes acknowledged. For me, I just know when that suggestion was made and when they kicked his door in. Although officially retired from law enforcement, he says he offers his services behind the scenes and has some role in both current cases like Delphi and cold cases like Zodiac and the Long Island serial killer. He says, but I would love to take on an expanded role and roll up my sleeves and actually get into it versus either getting updated as of what's going on or being a consultant in very finite ways. So, Kayla says, what a crock. Hi, Dan. Jeez. Why are people so weird? Hold on. Hi, Louise. I'll tell you, I have blocked more people covering Delphi than the entirety of every other case I ever covered. Adding them all together, I've blocked more people just covering Delphi. It's the weirdest shit. I hope that means that they have my address, that they're going to be sending me a present. Okay, so Carrie says, anyone else feel happy when they announced that they made the initial arrest of the murderer and have since felt as if the persons that actually did this is still roaming the streets out there? That is how I feel. I don't know. I mean, I don't know if he's still roaming the streets, but I feel like they fucked everything up. I was the one that was happy. I was happy when the arrest was made. I was like, finally, they got him. So I struggle with this whole reservoir of information that they just happen to overlook for 5.5 years. It just doesn't make a lot of sense to me, because they had, like, we know from like Cheyenne, who was one of the girls that was at the bridge and on the bridge, they went and talked to her. She said it took them 2 weeks to even come in and interview her. An ultimate rabbit hole. I don't know, because they like me and they want to come say hi. I found a 2016 Google search spike with Dan and Delphi Murders. Dan, you better watch out. Oh, look at, thank you, Dan. Hit the like and subscribe or else. How can you confirm that? That would be great if he said an audio or something. Hold on, what did C4 say? So, Roxanne, this is my big question. This is why I did this live, is because I cannot figure out, when you have so many discussing it just in general, and then you have Paul Holes, who's literally saying that he believes his suggestion in 2022 was to do geofencing, and they did, and he thinks they did, and that's why they ended up arresting Richard Allen. So I'm so confused by why Nick would be asking for no geofencing to be included, even if all the reasons that we've heard, you know, of that it was done by a different agency, or that it was expanded, or it was You know, the technology is updated. If they have any geofencing from 2017, 2019, 2022 that shows Richard Allen at the crime scene, why in the world would anybody want to keep that out as a prosecutor? Like, that's what I cannot make sense of. Love you, Louise. Think like Lolly and Karen Reed, T. They did not check the graveyard. Interesting if the girls wanted fast track back, if not hurt the road close. If not hurt, the road was close. Yes. The Google Trends thing, oh. Logan made a phone call at 2:09 and the tower was in his backyard. So I'm just trying to figure out what would be the reason that we would want to keep any of this out. Okay, any reference to geofencing and or any testimony from Kevin Horn about geofencing or the findings from any geofence search that is not relevant or is for the purpose of confusing the issues or has the potential to mislead the jury in violation of Rule 401. Burden is on the opponent to show why it is relevant. Relevant evidence may be excluded if its probative value is substantially outweighed by its prejudicial effect. Rolston v. State. Evidence may be excluded if it confuses the issues. So that's from Nick's request, but why in the world would he want it out? Well, but he wants to use the geofencing, but not allow the defense to use it how they want to. But they would have to, hey, Cryptex, they would have to, they're still going to be able to cross-examine on all of that. And if they bring geofencing in, then they open the door to geofencing, and legally, they can't stop the defense from talking about it. So you don't think he wants it out. You just think I don't understand that. Because it shows Ari going opposite direction and not to the crime scene. Okay, so let's talk about if Richard Allen, let's say it's not even Richard Allen. Let's go take out Richard Allen. Do you, as a person who has followed the Delphi case, do you believe this crime was premeditated or that it was just something that happened while the perpetrator was at the bridge? Do you put a 1 if you think it was premeditated, put a 2 whether you think it's Richard Allen or not, and then put a 2 if you think it was just happenstance and he lost his shit, or that the person lost their shit and that was it. So is it premeditated or is it not? 1, premeditated. 2, it's not. I think it's a mix, Miku says. So in the Royal, we says C. 1 premeditated, but with victims of chance. I always thought that too. Nick said the geofencing was unreliable. We did see. Yes, we did see. Excuse you. KK lies allowed them to get more info from Google is the basic gist of it. Okay, so most people in here think it was premeditated. Nancy thinks 2, crime of opportunity. 1.25. Okay, so premeditated. Then those of you who think premeditated are probably, you do not believe it was a box cutter. Something he thought about a lot and finally did it. Act was pre-planned, victims were opportunity. I've always kind of thought that too. It's like, you know, whoever falls into the trap at the end of the bridge. So premeditated would not be a box cutter, because that's crime of opportunity, right? I mean, he didn't take the box cutter when he's obviously he owns what, 15? I think I counted him. It was like 15 types of knives that they took from his house. So a box cutter would be crime of opportunity. Okay. So premeditated, does he take his phone with him or does he leave it in the car? Hi, Blake again. If it's premeditated, does he take his phone with him or does he leave it in the car? You cannot have a Milky Way in your pocket and a katana sword. You can have one in each pocket, no? You leave the phone at home. From what I understand, the response from the defense was literally just to Judge Gohl saying, hey, we're not phone experts. Nick has admitted he's not a phone expert. As far as we understand, you're not a phone expert, Judge Gohl. So what we need is for somebody to get on the stand and actually talk about the geofencing. We need an expert in this because none of us actually know. Leave it in the car or you turn it off. Okay, so then the next thing is if it's premeditated, how do you go about ensuring he's not a criminal, right? He doesn't have a criminal background that he's ever been caught for. So he leaves his phone in the car and takes his weapons, his gun, which doesn't make sense that he's going to use, right? Because are we thinking that he's going to use the gun? Is the perpetrator going to use the gun? It is. I mean, it's a pretty populated area, even if it's not right there. Somebody's going to hear a gunshot. Maybe they won't care because it's Indiana. So is the gun actually going to be the weapon? So choose your own adventure. Yeah. Hey, Tinfoil Hat Club. What did you say up here? I saw you up here. Hold on. Let me go back up. The guys at Fire and Ice, Frosty and Mark, at least really hit, in my opinion, at least hit the nail on the head when they speculated that Klein's confession gave them probable cause to get the actual personal data of individual devices. I haven't heard them say that. I'm behind on that from their shows this week. I haven't really watched anything. I've been doing life. So they think that the Klein's confession gave them probable cause to get the actual personal data of the individual devices. why would Klein's confession give them that probable cause and not the deaths of Abby and Libby? I don't know. I'll have to go back and listen to the context of it and see, because that doesn't make a lot of sense to me. I mean, they have probable cause. You have 2 dead girls. So I don't think they need probable cause from his confession to get any of the info. We know if Libby's phone was pinged on the geofencing. According to the defense documents, remember there was victim 1 and victim 2, which is kind of weird. They do, yes. They needed that person saying, I was there with the person who did it. Bullshit or not, they didn't know it was then. And so, boom, probable cause to get the names of who was there. But they had other names of people that were there using their phone. You have Daniel Pearson, who was at the bridge at the same time. You have Cheyenne and her friend that were at the bridge at the same time. I mean, we had other people who were there. I mean, maybe you're taking it like the step further of like somebody who was in the physical crime scene, like where the girls were found. Maybe I'll have to look at it and see. I'm reading comments. I'm not muted or anything. Fire and Ice. It's a channel that it used to just be Frosty's channel, and then now Frosty and Mark have like it's like a co-channel where they kind of co-host, and they talk about other cases too, but they also talk about Delphi. So it's just another YouTube channel called Fire and Ice. Where's the geofence warrant? Yeah, Carrie, me and you both. The only KK confessions we have heard are from him and his dad, so that all the devices they would have PC to search, not anybody else. They also already had his phones by the time that confession, by the time that he was giving that confession. I don't have the transcripts yet, but by the time that KK was giving this false confession about him and his dad, he'd already been arrested. Yeah, well, they do a good job too, so I'll go listen. I listen to them anyway. Different software had different results. Software advanced. I don't think I have any wrenches. I'll go grab it real quick, and then I'll put it in chat. Fire and Ice. Here is a link to their channel. All right, let me come back over here. The river search was for Klein, yeah. Over $1 million. Wait, what? I was watching the replay from last night and Phoenix was on and there was a super weird cut and all of a sudden they were talking about something about what? Why did Vito say KK was at his grandma's during the interview transcript and now KK and TK were both at home all day long? I thought, you guys know I'm not big on the KK stuff, so I had never thought that KK or Tony had anything to do with anything. I always thought that KK was just a giant liar who lies. So From my understanding, the grandma's house was one of the first lies about that. So like he had an alibi kind of thing. And there was something about a fire pit, but then there's no fire pit at grandma's. But then there's also a weird thing that grandma has like a car that is like a purple PT Cruiser. A geofence warrant doesn't require probable cause written with specific individuals. It just snags everybody with a broad net in a specific area at a specific time. That's why the Fifth Circuit threw it out. Right, because you're getting people who have nothing to do with anything. And that was a violation of their rights. I'm trying to remember what trial it was. But there was, oh shit, I wonder if I can find that again when we do the geofencing stuff. There was a trial where they were talking about that they geofenced an area and it came out with like 40 different users that were in this area at the time. And law enforcement wasn't allowed to run all of them. They had to randomly pick 10 and hope that they picked the right one. Does anybody remember that case? I've said 2 crimes were happening at the time. There was a CSAM bus that could have been connected to the murders of FBI agents in Florida in 2020. So the prosecution thinks CBS was handing out rapid edge cutters, and that's what they think cut the trees down and did this to the girls. I'm so confused. Yeah, I don't even think they think that. I think they're just trying. I think that that was one of the confessions. It was something about a box cutter, which we know that they don't all seem to match each other, all these confessions. And then when I think Perlmutter was on the stand was when Nick comes out and says, well, would your mind change if I told you that it was a box cutter that was used? He never actually says it was a box cutter. He just like throws it back out there, like to see if he can like throw her off. I've got infallible speculative theories too. Rick Allen came onto their radar because a ghost told them. I have the exact same amount of evidence to back up that theory too. My phone even responds to that and says, I didn't understand that. I didn't understand that, Phoenix. I didn't understand that. Okay, let's see what else there was in here. I was going somewhere with my whole choose your own adventure, and now it's gone because I started talking about other shit. We don't, yeah, Cleveland Rocks, that's a great question. We have no idea whose DNA it is. According to the depositions, it's not Rick's. That's what I think. I think that was the whole reason that he was sent there. Any word from Jody? Yeah, you know what? Let's go look. Let me look at my, because now that I got totally thrown off track at the end of it because my brain is like done. No, there's still no word back from Jody. But I do have some other emails that I definitely need to go through. Huh. Nope. Yeah, we're on Jody watch. I don't think she really, I'm definitely not her priority, let's be real. So, which is fine. I get it. She's got other shit to do. And she's just like, you're the last thing that I need to worry about. But the last email I received from her is when she said that a copy had been requested. So the transcripts had been requested so a copy would be available. So I'm going with it. It's going to be the $1 per page, but I don't know. It's weird because they've never requested the copy. They've never requested the transcripts in chunks like they did for this one, and I want the entire thing. So that's where we're at. Hey, John. Is the DNA they have spit? Because I know someone they could compare it to. You think. I don't even think they ever even got his DNA. So the biggest issue with the Jody situation is whether she's going to charge us $575 for the pages that they didn't request. Now, I don't know why she would not just write the entire thing. Did I read Greeno's letter to Jody? Not yet on here. I haven't. You want to talk about that? I haven't even read the whole thing. I read the beginning of it. Somebody said it was like 9 pages, and I didn't read all that. I just read the beginning. All right, let's see. Let me pull it up real quick. It's loading. Okay, let's see. Cease and desist. Unlawful transcript fees. Dear Miss Williams, can you guys see that okay? I am writing to address a serious concern regarding the fees being charged for the preparation of court transcripts by the Allen County Superior Court. It has come to my attention that the current rate being charged is $5.75 per page, which is significantly higher than the fee cap established by Indiana state law. According to the Indiana Code, the fee for preparing a transcript or a copy of the record should not exceed $1 per page. I know that that's for a copy. The state law takes precedence over any local rules or ordinances, and any fee structure that exceeds this limit is both unlawful and unenforceable. In your email dated August 7th of 2024 to a third-party individual, you stated, based on hearing length, 21 and a half hours of actual in-court time, the estimated page count is 750 and an estimated cost of the $43.12.50. This rate is in direct violation of an aforementioned Indiana state law. Furthermore, you mentioned the per-page rate is set by local rule. However, local rules cannot override state law. Charging $5.75 per page is not only unlawful, but also unethical, as it misleads individuals into believing that such fees are permissible. Additionally, you indicated that an out-of-state individual requesting documents would need to pick them up in person, stating individuals would have to go in and pick them up in Indiana in person, as it is too much to mail. According to the Indiana Access to Public Records Act, there is no provision that prevents the emailing of documents. In fact, the law allows for records to be provided electronically if requested. Federal FOIA guidelines also support the provision of records via email or other electronic means. The Indiana Access to Public Records Act requires a response to requests within 7 days if the request is made by mail, fax, or email. Failure to comply with this time frame is a violation of state law. Moreover, the 8th Amendment to the United States Constitution, which prohibits excessive fines, applies to state and local governments. The Supreme Court ruling in Tibbs v. Indiana reaffirmed that the excessive fines clause is incorporated against the states. I'd have to read up on that case. Charging $5.75 per page for transcripts could be considered an excessive fee, violating both state and federal constitutional protections. Therefore, I am formally requesting that the Allen County Superior Court immediately cease and desist from charging more than $1 per page for transcript preparation. Continuing to charge fees in excess of the state-mandated limit constitutes a violation of Indiana law and could result in civil and potentially criminal contempt charges for misappropriation of funds. Furthermore, if the court has ever charged any individual fees contrary to this law, I am requesting that this information be made public and that those individuals be reimbursed for the costs that they should not have incurred under Indiana law. Regarding the criminal case of Indiana versus Allen, the hearings on July 30th, 31st, and August 1st took place in Carroll County Circuit Court with Judge Francis Gold from Allen County Superior Court sitting as a special judge. According to Indiana law, a special judge appointed by the Indiana Supreme Court retains jurisdiction of the case for all future proceedings unless a specific statute or rule provides otherwise. Therefore, the Allen County Court Clerk would assume jurisdiction over the responsibilities associated with providing a record and transcript and collecting fees for this case. Please confirm receipt of this email and provide assurance that the necessary adjustments will be made to comply with Indiana state laws. I mean, you think it's GPT? I mean, it's written really well. I mean, I don't know some of those case laws, so I'd have to look at it to see if it, I mean, on its face, it's written really well. The Honorable Judge Gohl, motion to cease and desist unlawful transcript fees. Case this motion is filed to address the unlawful fees. Fact: the Allen County Superior Court is charging $5.75 per page for transcript. The court has indicated that local rules set the per page rate, but these local rules cannot override state law. The court has also stated that out-of-state individuals must pick up documents in person, legal basis. Here's the code. The Indiana, the 8th Amendment to the United States Constitution prohibits excessive fines. I don't know if they would be able to consider that a fine, though, so that's, I don't know. Let's calculate the cost according to Indiana law and compare it to the amount quoted by the clerk. Well, I think we all know that one. Relief sought. An order directing the Allen County Superior Court to cease and desist from charging more than $1 per page. An order directing the court to reimburse individuals who have been charged fees. An order directing the court to inform the public that these fees were unlawful and to ensure compliance with state law moving forward. That in accordance with Indiana law, email is a correspondence that has been deemed an appropriate legal procedure for obtaining information from the courts, filing motions and or petitions, and that denial of access to such information or the requirement that a person appear in the physical presence is contrary to the law. It limits transparency and receipt of information to only individuals who have the means to travel to the jurisdiction, which is discriminatory. The integrity of our judicial system relies on transparency. Okay, Greeno. The integrity of our judicial system relies on transparency and adherence to the law. It is imperative that the court complies with state regulations to maintain public trust and avoid any legal repercussions. Copies have been sent to the mayor, the county commissioner, the Supreme Court, Council of Record, Allen Superior Court, and Allen County Sheriff, respectfully. Greeno. Exhibit A. This is the one to Marv. It's very similar to mine. Okay, so this is her correspondence back. Based on hearing length, 21 and a half hours of action on court time, that is 750, to ensure the balance of costs due upon completion. Upon payment in full, the transcript will be transmitted to you. It says transmitted to you. Please be advised the amount above, the above amount is an estimate only. Actual cost of payment may vary from this amount. Payment can be made in cash, cashier's check, or money order. Estimated preparation time will be at least 4 to 6 weeks, so I have transcripts for appellate cases that must take priority. This is all prior to their request, just FYI. So I don't know where that puts her putting the transcripts together for this. If it should bump it, seeing as how we have trial in October, right? Yeah, I pay cash. So the 4 to 6 weeks might not have anything to do with anything anymore. As I have transcripts for appellate cases, if you are interested in proceeding with preparation, please let me know. Okay, here. Good morning, Jody. I would like a copy of the transcripts from the hearings. August 1st, the state of Indiana versus Richard Allen. Please advise on how I can obtain these. Oh, okay. So it was going backwards. I messed that up. Sorry. So why is it $5.75? Because the transcript has to be typed. If one has been prepared, then a copy would be available for $1 per page. But no one has ordered one, and so if you would like one, you have to pay for the work required to prepare it. The per page rate is set by local rule. Okay, so that's the last 3 pages, is the email correspondence between Marv and Jody. So, I mean, it's written well. Here's the thing. Is it going to do anything? No. I remember when we had talked about this, and now I'm going to have to go back and find it. When we had talked about this, when Sleuthy and Bob and R&M and Yellow Jacket all had gone in and paid for It was the first motion to dismiss, and they paid the $5.75 per page. And then I requested the motion to, what motion was it? Oh, the contempt. There's a motion for contempt on the defense attorneys. And by that point, the defense attorneys had already requested it. And so I got everything for $1 per page. But we looked up why it was, and there was and I cannot for the life of me remember, but there was the Indiana Supreme Court, I'm pretty sure, is who set the $5.75 per page, just from my memory. Hey, Sleuthy. Yeah, I got the contempt one. Why is he asking the Allen County Clerk of the Court for transcripts? The hearings were in Carroll County. She's still in charge of them. That's who. This is who I talk to, is Jody. She's still in charge of all of them, no matter where they are. Reno is like, these fines are cruel and unusual punishment. Then it's like, all right, being in isolation for almost 2 years is fine, because it happened. That's kind of what I was thinking. Like, it's written really well. I don't know if he used any type of AI to write it. He's pretty good with computers and AI. I wouldn't be surprised, but I mean, either way, I know there's another creator at one point who created something with like Chat GPT and actually left that on there. So I mean, at this point, at least we don't have that. But it is kind of interesting when we go to the whole like the cost of everything. It's like the integrity of our judicial system relies on transfer. He's not wrong. It does, but I mean, the integrity of our judicial system relies on following a person's constitutional rights. That's our foundation. It's the American foundation, and I don't know. But because somebody thinks this is what it is because once people think that they have the right guy and the person is guilty, nobody seems to care what happens. Nobody seems to care what happens to that person anymore. Some people only pay 99 cents a page. I'm outraged, and I'm writing letters. It is. That's what I mean. That's what I figure. I'd have to look at it. I don't know that off the top of my head, but that's what I said. Overall, it's written really well, and in my opinion, is not wrong. So I don't want to pay $4,300. I'm like, that's like a couple mortgage payments. It's like fucking extortion. I get that they have to pay somebody to actually do it, but they don't, Brian. That's the weirdest thing, is they don't actually transcribe the hearings. But they are recorded. And so that's another thing that I know a couple people have been looking into. Yeah, you get 8 pages. That's all you get. Unless it's the 575 pages, then you get like 1.5. Hey, Necessary Evil. They should take it out of the 2 million. Oh, look at you. Look at you up in your game. You're like, I'm buying myself another page. I don't know why we can't just get the recording. It would be so much better. Oh, so you don't think it's actually the recording then, KO? You think it's just the shorthand machine? 9 pages now. DB owns 9 pages of the transcripts. Yep, you get some weird cat watermarks on them. Okay, so you don't think it's... I thought they were all recorded too. The trial will be transcribed because well, not even necessarily. If Richard Allen is convicted, the trial will for sure be transcribed because the transcript is what it will have to be used in the appellate court. Y'all a trip. We have fun over here though. You own one out of 1963-ish of it, DB. If you throw in another buck for 10. All right, let me just check. I'm just checking comments, just see if I missed anything. I'm gonna wrap it up. We've been on for 3 hours, and I think we covered everything Paul holds and what he thinks about geofencing. So I think that's going to lead us into, I have like I said, I've been doing some research on that and talking to a few folk. And I've also been putting together another live that you guys, and I see All Eyes on Delphi has already sent me an email. Thank you for that, about where the initial source of information about the Richard Allen tip being changed to something like unfounded, or that, like, where it doesn't need follow-up. Because I keep hearing that over and over again, and I have looked and looked in the documents and cannot find anything that suggests that. So I see All Eyes on Delphi has sent me something. Anybody else who has anything on where they have heard that initially, not just from like YouTubers just talking about it after the fact, but like a source of it, the articles, the interviews, any of that, please send it to me, because I'm going to need it for that live that I'm putting together. Look at Cleveland Rock's coming in with $5. DB's now a partner. Look at, he's like all in. He's all in now. That's what I'm trying to, I can't, yeah, it's definitely not in the filings, because I went through the filings trying to find it. It's not there. So I'm trying to find what articles or news sources, who originally said it. So what, you know, one of those things that keeps being repeated, but I want the foundation of it. More like All Eyes on Pie, my new baking channel. So DB or All Eyes, if you're still here, when are you guys wanting to do your trivia night? Yeah, they have a recording. The recorder can't type that well. Me too, Chelsea, because I'm like, okay, if we figure it all out, we can at least try to, you know, piece it together. Let's go to the Carroll County Clerk tomorrow and ask for the transcripts. Is Indiana special? Well, I mean, depends on what kind of special. My real name is Larry, but with an upside down L. Cleveland Rocks is actually my sugar mama. If you show random lines of the DM and scramble them up so no one knows what's actually being discussed, that's the way to do it. But we'll do a fundraiser in a few days. We are still hammering out the details. Okay. For the fundraiser with some popcorn. For anyone I've ever met in my life. Perfect. All right. Well, keep me posted on that. As always, thank you guys. Thank you, Larry, with the upside down L. Thank you guys for being here. I know that you guys have 1,000 other places that you can spend your time, and yet you still choose to come and spend your time with me. And I appreciate each and every one of you. And I'm going to check my email, and I will get back to you guys by the latest tomorrow. So thank you. I appreciate you. Go enjoy the rest of your Tuesday, and I will see you guys mañana.
Do you dare to follow me down? Head into the unknown. Down the rabbit hole. Where it stops, no